2022, Hollywood, California. After a busy afternoon at his restaurant, Tim Ratcliffe steps out to grab some pizza next door.
I go to have lunch with my girlfriend, and we went outside to sit down at the patio.
But then, something at another table catches his eye.
I couldn't believe that I was actually seeing what I was seeing.
A man comes out of nowhere to sucker punch someone.
He was just knocked violently to the ground.
It's like my worst nightmare. You're chilling, having a nice lunch outside, and somebody tries to assault you or rob you.
The assaulter snatches the man's wallet, then makes a run for it, with Tim right on his heels.
So many people in that situation would be more in shock, like unable to process what they just saw, but he leapt right into action.
I just reacted. It was instinctual. He sucker punches me and my glasses go flying. Then the wallet, the cell phone of the gentleman that was stolen also go flying.
Have Tim's impulsive actions put him in danger?
The worst case scenario is Tim trying to be the hero here, not realizing that he could be dealing with someone who was armed or more dangerous than he expected.
Tim does have one advantage. He's trained in martial arts.
I studied judo for 4 years in Japan. It's great for defense. It definitely comes in handy when you're a vigilante.
As the two men struggle, Tim's girlfriend and another bystander jump in to help.
She just sprung right into action.
My girlfriend, Olga, had to kick him a couple times because he's trying to bite me. Then she was stepping on his legs. As I tackled the guy, a little over $1,000 fell out of my pocket. I'd just gone to the bank to make change for the restaurant.
And Tim's girlfriend, not only was she collecting the stolen items, but she was also getting all Tim's money back.
People walking by and driving by were thinking that this is crazy. He was pleading with me, asking and begging that he won't do this again, and he's so sorry.
Tim and his girlfriend managed to hold the thief down until help arrives.
It lasted at least 10, 12 minutes that we were on the ground. Fire department showed up first. They did crowd control. It's probably one of the busiest intersections in Hollywood.
Police arrest 28-year-old Michael Austin Donna and charge him with felony robbery. He is sentenced to 3 years probation.
Tim saved the day by capturing this man. Sweet justice served.
Tim's heroics quickly go viral with almost 1 million views.
And caught on video the moment a Hollywood restaurant owner took down a man who viciously attacked a customer.
There was news station crews waiting in the parking lot of my restaurant for me. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This went crazy viral.
Restaurant owner in Hollywood quickly jumped into action.
The 64-year-old victim, Richard Schlesinger, who broke his ribs when he fell to the ground, tells reporters he never saw it coming.
I mean, the guy cold-cocked me. It was out of nowhere. I was there with my dog. I was like, well, what is this?
For Tim, the most upsetting part is that the man responsible for the attack is someone he knows.
Michael is a homeless person. He had been coming around the restaurant for a couple months at that point. We'd give him water, give him food, and 3 or 4 minutes beforehand, I had just gone up to him and asked him, do you need anything? He had told me no, he was just fine. I was so emotional about the situation, and I didn't want to believe that this happened.
One bright spot in all of it is that Tim and the man he defended have now become friends.
Richard came down to have a discussion with me and thank me, and we sat down for a good hour. He told me we became brothers, and I 100% agree that we were destined to become friends.
And Tim has no regrets about putting himself in harm's way.
And I would do it again in a heartbeat. There's no reason for having injustice in public.
But as this next clip reveals, when you deal with the public, you never know who is on the edge of violence.
Do you have anything on you? Anything sharp?
You can never judge a book by its cover.
Stay out of the car. Ma'am, do not get in that car! No!
November 6th, 2021, St. Paul, Minnesota. Just before midnight, a state trooper stops a woman for driving erratically in a construction zone. Something is off.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Grandma, why are we acting like this?
It's almost midnight, and she's wearing sunglasses. That should have been the first red flag.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to find my way out.
Okay, this is a one-way.
Yeah, but do I go down this lane or that lane?
For a moment, it seems as if the woman is innocently confused.
This is a one-way?
Yeah, do you have your driver's license on you?
But dispatch warns the trooper, Lieutenant Jill Frankfurth, that the 70-year-old woman
Jean Ann Hansen
could be trouble.
Grandma has a track record, and it's a very concerning one.
All right, can you come over here for a second? Yeah. Do you have anything on you? Anything sharp? Any weapons or anything?
Nope.
Okay. You just come over here for me.
Sure.
Hey, do you want to have a seat in my back car?
Well, I don't want to have a seat in your back car.
So this is the deal. I just ran this license plate and something came back, so I got to figure it out. So I'm just going to put you back here until I can figure it out, okay?
Can I shut my...
I will take... We're not going... No, we're not going to go anywhere yet. Let's just stay here, and we're just going to figure out what's going on, and then
Why did they run my license plate?
I ran it when I made a traffic stop, so... Let's just go stay here back here for right now.
Let me
Okay.
shut it off.
Nope. I don't want you to go back in the car. Ma'am.
Hansen brazenly defies orders. She is hell-bent on getting back into her car.
No, ma'am.
Why is she trying to get into the car? What is she trying to get to? Is she trying to get back to the car to flee the area?
No, ma'am. Wait a minute. You're not allowed to come in here.
Why?
No, stay out of the car. Stay, ma'am. Do not get in that car.
And that's when things turn dangerous.
No! She got a gun!
When 70-year-old Jean Hansen is pulled over in St. Paul, Minnesota for driving erratically,
I don't want you to go back in the car. Ma'am.
she refuses to follow orders.
Do not get in that car.
And then,
No!
Lieutenant Jill Frankfurth
Don't!
sees something alarming.
No! She got a gun!
This is so dangerous. What if she shot the state trooper?
No! Don't!
From that distance, she could have killed her. No doubt about it.
No! She got a gun! Gun! She got a gun!
She gets behind the vehicle to create that boundary between her and the suspect.
Gun!
As the trooper screams, Hansen takes off.
She just pointed a gun at me.
Copy that. She pointed a gun at you and took off.
Another officer pulls up to see what all the commotion is about.
She pointed a gun at me. I don't know. They're trying to look on camera. She had a warrant.
Then, they go after Hansen.
She's fleeing felon. This is someone who we think is in possession of a gun. They're a danger to not only the officers that are pursuing her, but anyone else who's on that road.
We don't know where she's going next, who she might hurt next, or what is on her mind.
The getaway car is quickly located, and police find Hansen in the most unlikely hiding place.
She's on the outside of this bridge, hanging off with a bottle of tequila in her hand, and it became apparent that she was under some type of mental duress.
In mere minutes, a simple traffic stop has spiraled into a perilous ordeal.
You want to try to help them, but you have to proceed with caution because you don't know if it's a trap. Could they be trying to get you closer just to hurt you before they take out themselves?
This is kind of a perfect storm of disaster. Grandma's not listening to anybody, so they're calling backup.
You're talking the closing of a highway. You're talking SWAT team. You're talking negotiators, mental health professionals.
It takes 2 hours for negotiators to talk Hansen off the bridge. Police place her under arrest. And in court, the judge takes her past into account.
Jean was on a provisional discharge from a mental health facility.
Just 5 months ago, police were called to her house responding to a crisis. And what was Grandma doing? Wielding a shotgun. That time she was charged with second-degree assault and threats of violence.
For the traffic stop incident, Hansen is charged with making threats of violence, fleeing a police officer, and operating a vehicle under the influence. She's ordered to complete a mental health program and is given a stay of adjudication, which puts her on probation instead of behind bars. After her arrest, police learn something shocking about the gun.
She got a gun!
The gun is made of foil and duct tape.
She got a gun! Gun!
In the heat of the moment, you don't stop to think that gun is fake.
The wild story quickly makes headlines and goes viral with more than 500,000 views.
A major takeaway from this video is never judge a book by its cover because looks can be deceiving.
This situation could have ended terribly.
She got a gun!
In another frightening viral incident, it's a mail carrier who is caught by surprise.
Take a look at this shocking video.
Terrifying attack. You wouldn't expect a crime like this to happen in a neighborhood like this.
May 13th, 2023, Millburn, New Jersey. A mail carrier is on the second day of a new job.
This looks like a very nice neighborhood, very manicured lawns, very nice houses.
Then, out of nowhere, two masked men jump him.
And it's middle of the day, broad daylight. That's probably the most shocking part.
A home security camera records as he screams for help. The men violently knock him right out of his shoes.
It's super aggressive. They tackle him to the ground.
He was actually trying to get the AI in his smartwatch to call 911. I don't think that she understood he was under duress.
When you're trying to alert authorities and your devices are not working, all you can do is fight back. You can kick, you can scratch.
The attackers seem focused on trying to shake something out of his uniform. Then they abruptly flee.
Are you all right?
Lenny Whelan,
Are you all right?
the neighbor whose porch camera records it all, comes out to help. But there's not much he can do.
This crime happened so fast that police wouldn't even have had time to show up.
The mail carrier escapes with only minor injuries and is left in shock.
As a mail carrier, you're really looking out for dogs that are problematic, maybe homes that are hard to find. You're not thinking that someone's going to attack me.
The thieves get away with a skeleton key that opens mailboxes in a nearby apartment complex.
This could have turned out a lot more serious than it did. This man could have been killed.
In New Jersey, it wasn't a dog, but instead two masked muggers who chased a mail carrier.
The story tops the local news.
Terrifying attack on a postal worker.
And homeowner Lenny tells reporters he thinks it was calculated.
The first attack happened right here, and then they went around, as you saw from the video. They were watching. They knew exactly what he was doing. Unfortunately, this was only his second day on the job.
The post office offers a reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction.
Video shows the suspects run to a getaway car, possibly a silver Mercedes.
3 weeks later, police identify one of the men, 24-year-old Zachary Little. It turns out he already has a criminal conviction for unlawful possession of a weapon. For the attack on the mail carrier, he's hit with charges of second-degree robbery and conspiracy to commit robbery. As the video goes viral, people question just how smart our smart devices really are. When the world needed Siri the most, she vanished. Listens in the most unneeded places, but fails to identify an emergency.
It's really weird. We get these smartwatches because we want it to track our heart rate, make sure we're getting our steps in. But if you notice there's an elevated heart rate, and I'm clearly in a 360 position because I've gotten tossed around and assaulted, you would think, oh, something seems off. Maybe I should, send police.
But mostly, there's sympathy for a guy who was just trying to do his job.
I feel so bad for mail carriers. They're out in all of the elements. They're just trying to get people packages. And to find that someone wants to assault them, it's pretty heartbreaking.
And coming up, a disturbing scene so shocking, you'll need to see the video to believe it's true.
Dude, you cannot put your kid in the damn trunk!
We do want to warn you, the video is hard to watch.
Take the kid out the trunk!
I was just so upset.
Dude, you cannot put your kid in the damn trunk! Okay, let's no!
Something is really, really wrong.
No, dude!
August 4th, 2021, Pueblo, Colorado. It's a sweltering day, and Sarah Lucero, a busy mother of 5, is working at her beauty salon.
I had been here for a couple hours, and I just went outside to take a little break. I was on the phone, and I heard somebody screaming.
It sounds like a woman in the middle of an argument, so initially, Sarah brushes it off.
I thought like she was fighting with her boyfriend, to be honest.
Then, she sees what's really causing the commotion. The woman is inside a car, trying to punch someone.
I seen a little tiny hand come up and try to block it, and oh my God, it's a child that she's hitting. That's when I kind of lost it.
Sarah records on her phone as the woman gets out and tries to shove the young boy into the trunk.
He was just screaming, and she kind of like forced him in there with her hands.
Dude, you can't put that kid in the trunk. Dude, you cannot put your kid in the damn trunk.
Why is the woman doing this?
When it becomes clear that someone is placing a child into a trunk, my initial thought is this a kidnapping?
This is no stranger.
You ain't put a kid in no trunk. You don't know my child.
It's the child's own mother.
When you realize that this is the child's mother, that takes on a different level of scariness. You don't know what risk you're putting yourself in by getting involved.
Bitch, you cannot have that kid in the trunk.
It was 100 and something degrees. I knew if he had stayed in there, he would have died.
The car has no plates. If this mom takes off, the boy could vanish without a trace. As he wails, Sarah screams with even more urgency.
Take the kid out the trunk.
Finally, the woman relents.
Dude, I was gonna take it. Dude, check this out. No, dude. I swear to God.
When she pulled him out of the trunk, and he just looked like, what is going on? Why are you doing this to me? You could see the fear in his face. You could just feel his anxiety. Every part of him was shaking.
I don't give a what the you ain't getting no trunk.
If this is what's happening in broad daylight in public, what is happening to this child behind closed doors?
You ain't putting that kid in there, I promise you, bitch. Hey, check this out. He's a I don't give a I will tase you in your face.
I wasn't worried about me. I was worried about the child.
You need to back up now. Okay, listen. I don't give a you ain't putting a kid on no trunk.
You know what? Let him go with you for a week.
Let's see.
Sarah's rant has drawn other witnesses to the scene.
I have 5 kids, babe. I have 5. I have 5 kids, and I would never put a kid in no damn trunk. I don't care. It's a baby.
They call 911 and urge her to back off.
Everybody kept just telling me to let them leave, and I'm like, she just put her child in the trunk. If she leaves and this baby dies, we're all at fault.
And this isn't over yet. A man who's been sitting silently in the car the whole time gets out with a gun.
Trunk.
Sarah is terrified of what will happen next.
When that man comes into view, now you have 2 people who clearly are perfectly comfortable abusing a child in this way, who are trying to defend themselves.
After a few minutes of tense arguing, he backs off. But to Sarah's horror, the car speeds away before police arrive.
Well, police searching for a woman who reportedly put her 5-year-old child in the trunk of a vehicle. We do want to warn you, the video is hard to watch.
The disturbing video goes viral, and luckily, a woman who knows the mother turns her in. 33-year-old Chelsea Trujillo is quickly arrested and charged with violating bail and criminal trespass. She is sentenced to 3 years behind bars. Her 5-year-old son is taken into protective custody.
I was definitely overwhelmed with the news crews and people just showing up here at my salon, trying to send me gifts and money, and I don't feel like I deserve it. I feel like anybody should have done the same thing.
God bless this bystander, because in most cases, I do not advise people to get involved. Call the police. That's what they're there for. But in this case, when we're talking about a child that is actively being abused and is in imminent danger, this woman did the exact right thing.
I don't give a I will tase you in your face.
Restaurant terror.
A deli firebomb.
It sets the entire inside ablaze.
A nightmare at a popular fast food chain.
What is that?
Hey, get your ass out here!
lives in danger.
She opened fire.
And I said, she has a gun.
It is incomprehensible.
And a workplace attack you have to see to believe.
A judge attacked.
Chaos breaks out.
Shocking viral crimes caught on camera.
Now at 4:30, a deli that was firebombed.
Just heard the glass on fire in my face.
We held him here until police arrived.
October 30th, 2021, Brooklyn, New York. A bodega deli is busy with breakfast orders.
Everyone loves their local bodega. You're usually really friendly. They know your order if you go there all the time because it's a neighborhood spot.
But today, it's not business as usual. A security camera captures a man outside playing with something very dangerous.
The man holding the Molotov cocktail does not seem fazed. Most people, if they're holding something that's a ticking time bomb, are frantic, they're desperate, but it's as if he has a mission.
Before anyone can stop him,
it sets the entire inside ablaze. He's really lucky that he didn't set himself on fire.
As the two store clerks leap through the flames to save their lives, the man attempts to do it again.
He reaches down for another one.
These men were rushing out of the store, and they were right in the line of fire. He was about to throw the second cocktail right into their face.
That's when a brave bystander steps in.
He walks up to this perpetrator and just knocks the second Molotov cocktail right out of his hand.
If he had thrown that second one inside, they could have been seriously injured or probably killed. I mean, if this guy has Molotov cocktails and you wonder, like, what other weapons does he have on him? Does he have guns? Does he have knives? Does he have grenades?
The suspect makes a run for it, but out of camera view, one of the workers pins him to the ground.
The clerk that tackled him was cut with a knife, so clearly this guy was armed, had other weapons.
As they wait for police, the flames continue to blaze.
It could have gone really bad. There were cars on the street. Could have set the cars on fire. Could have been an explosion outside.
Luckily, a fire extinguisher prevents disaster. The scary video goes viral,
Bomba Molotov en una tienda en la ciudad de...
making worldwide news.
Molotov-Cocktail-Attacke mitten in New York.
Now to some dramatic surveillance video that captures a man throwing a Molotov cocktail into a Brooklyn deli and setting it on fire.
It turns out that the two men who were targeted are father and son. And they tell reporters the Molotov bomber argued with them earlier in the day.
He was threatening, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna burn the store, I'm gonna burn the building down.
You open the door, my son, you gun, I gun behind him.
I mean, this is New York. A typical dispute in bodega is a bit of yelling, someone storms off, maybe you throw the finger, but that's about it. Instead of going home and just like blowing off a little steam, he decides to bring back Molotov cocktails.
38-year-old Joel Mangle is charged with attempted murder, arson, aggravated assault, and criminal possession of a weapon. A search is launched for the coffee cup holding hero who risked his own life to help.
I'm hoping we can find that Good Samaritan. We would love to honor him at Borough Hall. It was really courageous.
But he never comes forward. Whoever he is, social media won't soon forget him.
The most amazing part of this is, he's knocking Molotov cocktails out of this suspect's hands. He is stomping out flames, and he never drops his coffee.
And you won't forget these next viral attacks, which reveal how fast food can be unhealthy in more ways than one.
Get your ass out here! Anyone who's this brazen, I'm not gonna mess with. You realize people will do anything for money.
Fast food restaurants can be magnets for crime.
If you're working in retail in restaurants, there's always that chance that someone might come in and try to rob you.
And the robberies are so shocking, they often make viral waves. At a Houston eatery, the culprit is an opportunist in disguise.
He did place an order at the drive-thru. He was acting as if he was going to pay for this order.
But then
he tried to ask the drive-thru employee for the money. Came in, when she turned around, grabbed the money, bolted off. All within 15 seconds max.
The scariest part of this entire scenario is how collected this guy was.
Police believe he's responsible for at least 5 other fast food hits, but have yet to ID him. In New Orleans, a man tries to rob a restaurant with a menacing weapon.
You kind of just freeze because you're like, what is that?
The machete sends everyone running, except for this guy.
The weirdest part about this video is there's a person sitting at a table by the front that the machete guy has walked by who just sits at the table the entire time and doesn't move.
The masked criminal escapes with the cash register and remains at large. In Detroit, a knife-wielding thief storms a chicken spot.
Don't do it! I'm serious. Okay, I'm getting it. I want to see everyone right here. Hey! Get your ass out here!
Yet, he does have manners.
Sure, I appreciate that. You guys have a good day.
The polite thief leaves employees shaken. The video hits the news.
What Sterling Heights employees did after this man came at them with a large knife.
And police soon arrest 26-year-old Andrew Hayden, charging him with armed robbery, resisting, and obstructing an arrest. He's sentenced to 20 years.
Sure, I appreciate that. You guys have a good day.
And coming up next, a fast food mistake has a family fearing for their lives.
My daughter was screaming. She shot at us.
Sometimes viral food videos have endings you just don't see coming, like this one in South Dakota. A woman orders a burger on a delivery app. She checks to see why it's taking so long and notices that her driver isn't moving. At first, she thinks the driver's car probably broke down. She isn't prepared for what happens when the doorbell rings.
Well, I'm not who you're expecting, but your driver got arrested for things he hasn't taken care of. So I figured I'd complete the DoorDash for you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
It turns out that on the way to deliver the woman's food, the driver got arrested by this officer for outstanding warrants. The funny aftermath video gets a whopping 23 million views.
A Sioux Falls woman and a police officer have gone viral.
We had a report of an officer that was moonlighting as a DoorDash employee while on duty. That's not exactly accurate.
As uplifting as this viral story is, our next clip might have you terrified to ever go through a drive-thru again.
We were all frantic. My family was in danger.
She opened fire.
All of this over curly fries?
It is incomprehensible.
March 3rd, 2021, Houston, Texas. Anthony Ramos, who lives in Florida, is in town working a construction job.
We were fixing churches and the universities and schools that the water pipes had broke there.
After a 13-hour day, he can't wait to pick up his pregnant wife and 6-year-old daughter, who are flying in for a visit.
I was extremely excited to see them. I didn't see them in a couple weeks.
The first thing on the agenda? A drive-through stop so Anthony can share his favorite fries with his family.
We ordered a couple burgers, curly fries, and a churro.
From the get-go, the woman who hands him their food seems annoyed.
I remember something a little off about the lady at the moment, but I didn't think anything of it.
They get their order, and what is it missing? Curly fries.
She gave us the wrong fries.
But the employee, Alonia Ford, refuses to do anything about it.
I even offered to drive back around to make another order.
And that's when things go sideways.
So they listen, I want to speak to a manager. And she goes, my manager don't have no time for y'all asses. You need to get the F out of here.
Typically, they give them back to you, or worst case scenario, you say, well, I'm gonna email a complaint to the business. But they got into a really heated fight.
And then that's when the lady from the back came and was asking me, what's going on? What's the problem?
Even as her coworker tries to calm things down, Ford keeps at it.
Miss Ford was like, don't listen to them, they're a bunch of effing liars. And then that's when I told her, ain't nobody talking to you no more.
The tension is building. This escalated very quickly.
And then that's when she hit me with the ketchup packets. It was on. I was upset. I had a big burger in my lap and I flung it. My wife flung the drinks.
That's when Ford pulls a weapon out of her pocket.
The most surprising part of it all was just how casually a gun appears.
The other employee doesn't seem terribly fazed.
There is no one trying to wrestle a gun away. There is no one that is trying to stop this woman.
The gun is less than 3 feet from Anthony's daughter.
She was in the seat right in back of me. And I just put my foot on the gas and I said, we gotta move now, she has a gun. We were all frantic. My daughter was screaming. She shot at us. You could see her pulling the trigger.
This woman was so close to the car, so physically close to them when she pulled out that gun. She put all of them at danger.
And what she does next is bizarre.
After the shooting, she just goes back to work as business as usual, ready to take the next order.
We drove maybe about a half a block to a hotel. We checked everybody to make sure everybody was okay.
That's when Anthony calls for help.
911 operator.
I called the cops, and I've just been shot at, and I need the police to come right away.
9 minutes later, police pull up to the drive-through window. But Ford isn't arrested until after they review the security footage.
I was furious. She got arrested 2 days later.
Video of the shooting immediately goes viral, and people label Ford a danger to society.
Social media really tore into this woman. You cannot open fire and shoot at a customer because you have a dispute over curly fries.
Ford is charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Ultimately, she pleads guilty to a misdemeanor of deadly conduct and gets a year of probation.
I don't think that the punishment fit the crime at all. How does a person who shoots at a family not get jail time?
When she completes her probation, Ford turns to the press to clear her name.
I served my sentence. I paid my fees. I did what I had to do. What else do you want from me?
The frightening ordeal has changed the family's life.
Well, we don't even go through drive-thrus anymore. We eat at the house. My daughter You know, we still take her to therapy. I don't let my daughter put down the windows in the back seat.
The family has filed a civil suit against both Ford and the fast food restaurant, and Anthony remains deeply shaken by all of it.
She could have took my life that day. She could have took my daughter's life. Well, I would never even met my son that was in the womb. Just a thought, like, my life could have ended right there over some French fries.
The drive-thru is one place you don't expect your life to be in jeopardy. But job in a courthouse is most certainly another, which is why this next video will leave your jaw on the ground.
That shocking moment in the Las Vegas courtroom.
I don't think anybody expected this.
It's in the blink of an eye.
Chaos breaks out.
January 3rd, 2024, Las Vegas, Nevada. In the Clark County District Court, Judge Mary Kay Holthus is working through a crowded docket.
The judge is about to issue her sentence for this individual who is a multi-time offender.
Mr. Redden, is there anything you want to say on your own behalf before I pronounce sentence?
I feel that, I shouldn't be, sent to prison for a second time.
Have you looked at your criminal history? 3 felonies, 9 misdemeanors, multiple DVs. Got a lot going on, sir.
I'm in a better place.
This is a defendant who is begging for mercy, claiming that he's changed.
I have a support system. I feel like I should be given a shot.
The offender is calm, cool, collected. He's playing the role.
I appreciate that, but I think it's time that he gets a taste of something else. In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court...
You watch her reaction, she realizes that there's a problem and tries to protect herself. But it happens so quickly. It's almost in the blink of an eye.
Then she goes down, and we don't see her again.
The entire courtroom is in shock as a frantic clerk joins the court officers who are trying to apprehend the suspect.
You have to understand, that's not a police officer. That's not someone who's trained in the proper techniques to use to gain control of someone. This is just a court clerk. He's doing more than he's required to do.
This is scary.
Did this individual have a weapon on them that we didn't know about?
This situation needs to be diffused immediately.
Stop. Don't do this. Please, please. Is she okay?
I'm sure in that moment she was very scared, not knowing that when she came into work that day that she may be fighting for her life.
It took a number of people to defuse this situation.
Incredibly, the judge is all right. She walks away with only minor bruising. But her bailiff isn't as lucky.
One of the sheriffs actually required 25 stitches to close him back up.
Video of the frightening incident quickly goes viral and makes national news.
That shocking moment in the Las Vegas courtroom, a judge attacked on the bench by a man she had just sentenced.
Violently attacked the judge.
3 days after the violent assault, 30-year-old Deobra Redden is brought back to court. And this time, they make sure he can't do it again.
The two scenes from what happened in the courtroom are like night and day.
Redden is charged with 15 new felony and misdemeanor counts, including attempted murder. Surprisingly, this all takes place in front of the same judge who refused to allow the incident to scare her.
With a couple extra bumps and bruises, she was right back to work, so kudos to her.
At at the end of the day, the hope is that nothing like this will happen in another courtroom.
Shocking attacks caught on camera.
There's hair pulling, glasses breaking.
Stories from victims who survive unbelievable terror.
We gotta move. She has a gun.
Come to my house. We got shots fired. You're dead hit.
Emotions dangerously out of control.
It becomes a big group melee. This was a massive explosion.
Get out of the park.
Instantly mega viral.
Stop, police!
This video is really shocking to watch.
Drop the gun! Drop it now!
The night air in Aurora, Illinois, carried a chill that seemed to settle in the bones of anyone who dared walk the empty streets. September 12, 1991, a quiet Thursday evening, would become the first mark of a mystery that would haunt the town for decades. A young woman, 22-year-old Emily Carson, vanished without a trace. The last anyone saw her, she was walking home from her job at the downtown diner, a brown paper bag in her hand, the soft glow of neon signs flickering across her anxious eyes. No scream, no struggle, no sign of a getaway. Only the faint echo of her footsteps swallowed by the darkness. The diner's cook would later recall how she had seemed distracted, uneasy, glancing over her shoulder more than usual. A stranger in the crowd? Or a shadow of a fate she couldn't yet see? By morning, Emily's apartment was empty, her bed untouched, the scent of coffee still lingering on the counter, her favorite mug waiting like a silent witness. Her parents reported her missing within hours, fearing the worst. Police swept the streets, questioned neighbors, her co-workers, anyone who might have noticed a suspicious car, a stranger lingering near her path. Nothing. No evidence. No body. No ransom note. Only the quiet hum of fluorescent lights in the precinct, and the growing dread that something had gone horribly wrong. Aurora, usually sleepy and secure, felt its heartbeat quicken as whispers spread through the community. A girl gone. No warning. No trace. Panic settled like a thick fog over the town. Detective Harold Jensen took the case personally. His years on the force had seen disappearances, domestic disputes, robberies gone wrong, but this felt different. The empty spaces left by Emily's absence were not just physical. They hung heavy in the air, impossible to fill. He combed through her routines, traced her steps from the diner to her apartment, cataloged every acquaintance, every fleeting interaction that might provide a thread. But the trail led nowhere. Security cameras were rare in 1991, and the ones that existed had only blank frames for that night. Streetlights flickered along her route. The sidewalks were barren. A stranger could have approached, taken her without resistance, and vanished into the shadows. Yet Detective Jensen refused to believe it was random. Something in the timing, in the precision of her disappearance, spoke of planning, of a mind working in cold calculation. Days turned into weeks. The town's nervous energy morphed into desperation. Flyers dotted lampposts, handbills stuffed in mailboxes, her face staring back from every corner store. Local news anchors described the case repeatedly, their voices tight, breathless, trying to capture the fear that gripped everyone. Tips poured in, some plausible, most absurd. A man had been seen driving a white van near Emily's apartment. A witness claimed to have heard screams from the nearby park. A transient in the city claimed he saw a woman matching Emily's description being forced into a car. Each lead was dissected, each statement cross-checked, but nothing held up. One by one, the threads unraveled, leaving the investigation tangled in its own frustration. Emily's family became prisoners of uncertainty. Her mother, Margaret, clutched her daughter's old jackets each night, as if holding them close could pull her back. Her father, Thomas, refused to eat, wandering the streets in search of any clue, any sign. Neighbors watched helplessly as the household dissolved under the weight of unknown horror. At night, the wind moaned through the eaves like a voice, asking questions that no one could answer. Time passed. The urgency of the initial search faded into the slow ache of unresolved loss, the cold case file growing thick with reports, evidence photos, and handwritten notes, all screaming for answers that would not come. Months later, a new lead emerged, small and almost inconsequential. A man had reported a suspicious individual loitering near the train tracks that cut through Aurora, carrying a heavy duffel bag. Police interviewed the witness, sketches were drawn. But again, the lead evaporated. The duffel bag was never found, the man never located. Each promising thread seemed to snap in the same cruel pattern, leaving only the haunting image of Emily walking home that last evening, unaware that her life would fracture the community forever. Years slipped by. The city moved on, yet Emily's disappearance remained a ghost, whispered in back alleys, recalled in old newspapers, remembered by those who had known her laughter. Detective Jensen, now approaching retirement, kept her case file open on his desk, a testament to persistence and obsession. Modern methods, however, began creeping into the precinct. DNA technology, databases, cold case units dedicated to solving what once seemed impossible. The hope for closure, long buried beneath decades of silence, flickered once again. It was a chance phone call in 2019, 28 years after Emily vanished, that reignited the fire. A lab technician noticed a match in a DNA sample submitted years ago from a distant county. The match was faint, a whisper from the past, but it provided a direction, a single, specific name tied to an individual in Illinois, someone with a criminal record, someone whose presence in Aurora in 1991 had been undocumented, but now could be traced through old employment and utility records. The investigation roared back to life, detectives scouring decades-old documents, revisiting every interview, and retracing every street Emily had walked. New technology allowed police to examine evidence that had sat in a freezer for decades: trace hairs, fibers, microscopic residues. Each discovery seemed minor at first, but when combined, a mosaic formed. The duffel bag near the train tracks was found, long discarded, nearly decomposed, but preserved in a forgotten storage facility. Inside, remnants confirmed the horrifying truth. Emily had been taken, held, and ultimately murdered. The shock reverberated through the community, decades after her disappearance, shaking even those who had long grown numb to the cold case file's presence. Yet the story did not end with evidence alone. Witnesses came forward, people who had been silent for fear of reprisal, for shame, for the weight of memory. Each testimony, each recollection, fit together like pieces in a complex puzzle, finally revealing the path that had led Emily into the darkness. Names, faces, locations, all emerged in a terrifying clarity. The perpetrator, once thought lost in anonymity, was now a figure of scrutiny, a target of law and justice. The arrest, when it came, was swift and unavoidable. Courtrooms filled with murmurs, journalists scribbled notes furiously, and families long fractured by fear and grief finally exhaled, knowing that truth had at last pierced the veil of decades. Even with resolution, the town remained haunted. Emily's disappearance had left a mark on every corner of Aurora, a shadow that would never fully lift. The streets where she had walked were no longer the same. The neon signs, the diner where she laughed with friends, the apartment where she had once laid her head, all now etched with memory, sorrow, and a sense of fragile closure. The family, at long last, could grieve with the knowledge of what had happened, but the specter of those lost years lingered, a reminder of the price of silence and the persistence of evil hidden in plain sight. And yet, as the final gavel fell, and the news broadcast declared the cold case solved, there remained a hush over Aurora. A quiet understanding that while justice had been served, the scars of the past do not fade. Shadows linger in empty streets. Wind whispers through abandoned buildings. A missing voice, long silent, echoes in memory. Emily's story, brutal and unrelenting, had ended only in part, leaving the town forever changed, A community bound by grief, by fear, and finally, by the fragile bomb of truth revealed too late, yet unflinchingly real. The morning after the arrest, Aurora felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. People walked the streets with cautious eyes, scanning windows, scanning strangers, as if evil could hide behind any door. The diner where Emily had worked still smelled faintly of coffee and grease, yet the laughter and clinking of dishes had vanished. Her favorite stool at the counter remained empty, a small monument to absence. Margaret Carson, her mother, stood there for hours, clutching a photograph of her daughter, smiling, alive, unaware that the world could be so cruel. She traced the edges of the picture with trembling fingers, her mind replaying every detail of that night in 1991. The neon reflections on wet pavement, the shadows stretching long and unnatural, the faint echo of her daughter's footsteps. Detectives returned to the scene of Emily's last known movements. They walked the streets as if reading a script written decades earlier, retracing each corner, each alley, each lamppost that might have witnessed the crime. Neighbors spoke hesitantly, their words tinged with guilt, with fear. "I saw her," one elderly man whispered, voice shaking. "I thought she looked uneasy. I didn't think anything would happen." His eyes darted to the ground, to the cracks in the sidewalk, as if the concrete itself held secrets. Police photographs were taken again. Forensics teams dusted surfaces that had long since collected dust and decay. Yet every discovery, every fingerprint, every shard of evidence seemed to carry the weight of 28 years. The past refused to stay buried. The duffel bag found near the train tracks had been meticulously cataloged, but now, under modern scrutiny, the contents told a story so grim it sent chills through even seasoned investigators. Fibers matched Emily's clothing. DNA confirmed her presence. Traces of hair and skin revealed an encounter so intimate, so close, that the brutality became impossible to ignore. The bag itself was nondescript, weathered, but it had preserved a horrifying testimony of the final moments of a life stolen in the shadows. Each lab result, each report, became a piece of the puzzle that had eluded capture for decades. The detectives, working in shifts, pored over the minutiae, connecting dots that once seemed scattered beyond recognition. Neighbors recalled strange occurrences long forgotten. The hum of a car engine at odd hours, shadows flitting across windows, odd packages left by fences, unexplained phone calls, a silence that spoke louder than words. For years, no one had linked these incidents to Emily's disappearance, but now, with fresh insight, patterns emerged. They drew maps of sightings, traced timelines with meticulous care, piecing together the unseen choreography of a predator's movements. Each revelation brought a shiver of fear. How close had someone been? How near had danger lurked? And no one had known until the truth arrived decades too late. Emily's friends were interviewed again. Old letters, scraps of diaries, notes tucked into textbooks, all resurfaced. One friend, trembling, recalled the last conversation. Emily had mentioned a man, persistent, friendly at first, then unervingly insistent, following her to the bus stop, asking questions about her routine. At the time, it had seemed trivial, a minor annoyance. But now, with the knowledge of what had occurred, the casual mention became a horrifying prelude. A smile turned sinister in retrospect. Innocence exploited. Life interrupted. Every word, every memory, cast in a new light of fear and regret. Social media, modern journalism, and national coverage amplified the story. The world watched as the cold case cracked open, decades of unanswered questions now confronted by relentless truth. News anchors repeated the chilling facts, but no broadcast could capture the intimate terror of those who had known Emily personally. Her high school classmates, now adults with children of their own, felt a gnawing unease. Memories of the girl who had danced in the cafeteria, who had laughed too loudly, too freely, now interwoven with the stark reality of her fate. Childhood corridors, once safe and mundane, now seemed to carry echoes of danger unnoticed at the time. Detective Jensen, older now, watched the case unfold with a mix of relief and sorrow. He had lived in the shadow of Emily's disappearance for nearly 3 decades, navigating dead ends, false leads, and the gnawing frustration of injustice deferred. His hands shook slightly as he reviewed the arrest records, the photographs, the DNA reports. Justice, finally, was tangible, yet the price paid in years of fear, grief, and uncertainty remained indelible. He thought of Emily's parents, their faces lined with suffering, and wondered if any resolution could truly heal wounds carved so deep, so long ago. The perpetrator, now in custody, had a history the community had never fully understood. A man known for manipulation, for exploiting trust, for shadows in the night. His confession, when it came, was cold, methodical, almost rehearsed, a recounting of years-old events with unsettling clarity. Details that had eluded investigators for decades were now laid bare. The timing, the stalking, the subtle maneuvers that ensured no witness could intervene. Each revelation sent shockwaves through Aurora, a stark reminder that danger often wears the face of normalcy, that evil can blend seamlessly into everyday life. Local authorities arranged a memorial for Emily, a ceremony understated yet profound. Friends, neighbors, and family gathered in silence, lighting candles that flickered against the dusk. Speeches were minimal, tears abundant. Margaret Carson spoke quietly, her voice raw. "We never stopped hoping, but some hope was just survival. Now we know what happened. Now, we can remember her, not the fear that took her." The wind carried her words down the streets, mingling with the autumn leaves, drifting past the diner, past the sidewalks Emily had once walked. Closure, fragile and tentative, hung in the air. Even as the community exhaled, the story continued to ripple. Crime analysts studied the case, noting the unusual precision, the missed opportunities, the small failures that allowed the crime to go undetected for so long. Lessons were drawn, protocols updated, a city determined not to repeat the blind spots of the past. Aurora, scarred but resilient, began implementing neighborhood watches, community reporting lines, improved street lighting, cameras at strategic points. Fear became vigilance, grief transformed into action, the echoes of Emily's disappearance shaping policy as much as memory. Psychologists consulted on the case, analyzing the long-term impact on families and community. Children who had grown up alongside Emily's absence bore subtle marks: anxiety, mistrust, unease around strangers. Adults recounted dreams, flashes of memory, nightmares interlaced with guilt. The case became a study not just of crime, but of the human psyche under prolonged uncertainty, the strain of living alongside unresolved horror. The term cold case trauma entered discussions, research papers, workshops, all attempting to quantify the ripple effect of a single act of violence left unanswered for decades. Media outlets revisited old headlines, drawing attention to the procedural evolution of crime solving. Stories compared the 1991 investigation to modern methods, forensic breakthroughs, DNA mapping, digital tracking. They highlighted the persistence required, the sheer patience of law enforcement to sustain a cold case for nearly 3 decades. Emily's story became emblematic, not only of tragedy but of perseverance, of the eventual triumph of meticulous work, of science and human determination converging to uncover the truth. Yet, beneath every headline, beneath every article, beneath every analysis, remained the human core, the loss, the absence, the echo of footsteps never returned. The streets of Aurora retained a quiet vigilance. Eyes scanned sidewalks instinctively, doors locked with extra care. The diner's neon lights continued to flicker at night, casting eerie reflections on wet asphalt, conjuring memories of a vanished life. Shadows stretched unnaturally long along the alleys, carrying with them the weight of unspoken fear and remembered sorrow. As trials progressed, as courtroom doors opened and closed, as justice processed decades of pain, the Carson family remained at the center. Their home, once a place of unending anxiety, became a quiet sanctuary of acknowledgement. They could speak of Emily without trembling, could remember her without the edge of uncertainty. Yet, even in the clarity, a shadow lingered. What was lost could not be reclaimed. Time stolen could not be returned. The joy of her presence, the simple weight of her laughter, remained a memory, as tangible and unreachable as a photograph pressed against a heart. Aurora slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Children played in yards once heavy with silence. Adults returned to routines, cautious but unbroken. Businesses reopened, streets cleared, life pressed forward. Yet beneath the surface, a hum of tension remained, subtle, persistent. Emily's story had rewritten the city's understanding of safety, of community, of vigilance. Every shadow, every unexplained sound, every flicker of light carried with it the ghost of that September night in 1991. Detective Jensen, now retired, would often sit in his armchair, staring at old case files, at photographs, at faded notes. He recounted the investigation to friends, to family, to anyone willing to listen, emphasizing diligence, persistence, and the thin line between success and stagnation in law enforcement. He spoke of hope deferred but not extinguished, of the extraordinary patience required to solve what had been forgotten by many, but never by him. And he remembered Emily, not merely as a case, but as a person whose absence shaped a life, a city, a legacy of vigilance and remembrance. The case, finally closed in the courts, did not erase the scars. It did not erase the nights of fear, the endless questions, the silent tears of a mother and father who had waited decades for answers. Yet it delivered truth, undeniable and final, a confrontation with reality that allowed a community to breathe. Emily's name, once whispered in fear, now resonated in acknowledgement, a symbol of persistence, of justice finally realized. And as Aurora settled under the quiet of a post-summer evening, the streets emptying of hurried footsteps, one could almost hear the faintest echo of Emily's presence. Not in the streets, not in the diner, not in the photographs, but in the vigilant hearts of a city forever changed, a reminder that even in absence, memory endures, and truth, no matter how long buried, ultimately breaks through the darkness. Even after the arrest, Aurora breathed cautiously, as if each shadow could still harbor secrets. The streets, familiar yet uncanny, seemed to stretch longer at night, carrying echoes of Emily Carson's last footsteps. The diner where she had worked felt smaller, quieter, each chair and counter a reminder of laughter that had vanished forever. Investigators returned repeatedly to the scene, not out of necessity, but out of reverence for the details that had remained frozen for nearly 30 years. Light poles, cracked sidewalks, the faded line of the crosswalk, all had silently witnessed the unfolding of a life interrupted, yet the weight of memory lingered like fog, clinging to walls, settling into the air. Detective Jensen accompanied them, his pace deliberate, his eyes tracing the familiar streets. Every detail mattered, every corner told a story. He recalled how, in 1991, the neighborhood had seemed so safe, so ordinary, that no one had questioned the small irregularities, the strange car parked too long, the footsteps behind a fence, the man loitering near the tracks. Now, with the clarity of hindsight, the pieces clicked together with chilling precision. A single night of terror had stretched into decades of silence, and yet the landscape itself seemed complicit, holding secrets in its cracks and shadows. The media swarmed once more. News helicopters hovered over the train tracks where the duffel bag had been discovered, zooming in on the barren stretches of land where Emily's fate had first intersected with that of her abductor. Reporters read from worn police files, their voices steady but strained, trying to convey the horror of a case that had evaded resolution for so long. Social media buzzed with speculation, remembrance, outrage, and relief. Analysts debated what went wrong in 1991, dissecting procedural gaps, missing evidence, delayed interviews. Yet beneath every broadcast was a common thread, a haunting reminder of a girl who had walked home one September night and never returned. Inside the Carson household, the atmosphere had shifted in subtle ways. Margaret and Thomas Carson could finally discuss Emily's disappearance without collapsing under the weight of uncertainty, yet the silence of the missing years pressed heavily on their hearts. Margaret often sat by the window, staring down the street Emily had walked, as if expecting to see her daughter emerge from the shadows, smiling, unaware of the decades of terror that had been unspooling elsewhere. Thomas paced quietly, tracing the route with his fingers over maps, revisiting every detail, imagining the events in minute, unbearable detail. Their grief had not vanished. It had transformed, shaping their every thought, their every memory. Yet in the midst of sorrow, there was a sliver of peace, an acknowledgement of truth finally revealed. The investigation into the perpetrator's movements revealed unsettling patterns. In the days leading up to Emily's disappearance, he had been observed in multiple locations near the diner, near her apartment, near the tracks. Casual encounters, unnoticed behaviors, the subtle stalking that had gone entirely undetected. Small acts, a glance here, a question there, compiled into a terrifying choreography, the precision of someone who had studied routines, habits, and vulnerabilities. Police reviewed old witness statements, piecing together testimonies that had once seemed inconsequential. A neighbor who saw a van idling for hours, a man who remembered a strange figure lurking near the park, an employee who thought nothing of an unfamiliar face in the diner. Each detail, revisited under modern scrutiny, revealed a web of predation that had evaded capture for decades. The duffel bag, preserved in a forgotten storage facility, became the key artifact in court proceedings. Fibers, DNA, trace residues. Each microscopic detail told a story of confinement, struggle, and violence. Forensic experts testified to the precision of the perpetrator, the calculated nature of the crime, the steps taken to ensure Emily could not escape. The horror of the discovery was compounded by the time elapsed, the knowledge that someone had carried out these acts with a level of control and planning that left an entire community blind to danger. The courtroom was silent as the evidence was presented, the weight of decades of fear and uncertainty pressing down on every listener. Meanwhile, Aurora's residents wrestled with the lingering unease. Streets they had once walked casually now seemed fraught with possibility. What had gone unnoticed, what might still remain hidden. Parents became more vigilant, checking doors, locking gates, teaching children to notice details once overlooked. Neighbors exchanged quiet conversations about unusual behaviors, about moments in hindsight that now seemed ominous. The city, scarred but alert, began to reconstruct a sense of safety on foundations of heightened awareness and learned caution. Emily's disappearance had left an imprint, one that would inform civic behavior for generations. Psychologists and community experts noted the long-term impact of cold cases on towns like Aurora. Anxiety persisted, often invisible, yet undeniable. Children who had grown up in the shadow of Emily's absence exhibited subtle traits: hypervigilance, mistrust, unease with strangers. Adults recounted dreams filled with images of missing figures, a lingering sense of helplessness. Researchers described the phenomenon as ambient grief, the omnipresent awareness of unresolved trauma permeating daily life. Emily's story became a case study, a textbook example of how a single unresolved crime could ripple through the consciousness of an entire community, leaving marks that endured long after the perpetrator had been caught. The courtroom proceedings drew national attention. The perpetrator's demeanor was unsettling, calm, deliberate, almost detached as he recounted details that had haunted investigators for decades. The meticulous recounting of events, dates, locations, minor movements, revealed a level of planning that made the case even more chilling. Each word, each statement, underscored the precision of predation, the coldness of someone capable of exploiting vulnerability with patience and calculation. For those watching, it became not just a story of justice, but a lesson in vigilance, a reminder that the ordinary could conceal extraordinary danger. Emily's parents attended every hearing, their faces etched with sorrow and determination. Margaret's eyes, often rimmed with tears, remained fixed on the defendant, searching for signs of remorse. Thomas, stoic yet trembling beneath his composure, held tightly to photographs and mementos of Emily, her schoolwork, her letters, her favorite jacket. These objects, once mere personal keepsakes, now became symbols of survival, remembrance, and the perseverance of memory against the crushing weight of time. Their presence in the courtroom was a quiet assertion of the humanity behind the headlines, the lives behind the statistics. As the trial progressed, journalists uncovered previously overlooked records, employment logs, phone records, utility bills, that painted a more complete picture of the perpetrator's life and movements in 1991. Patterns emerged: times of absence, periods of observation, subtle manipulations of routine. Each detail was cross-referenced, each discrepancy scrutinized. The mosaic of investigation, once fragmented by decades, now coalesced into a terrifyingly coherent narrative. The patience, the dedication, and the technology combined to illuminate truths that had lain dormant for nearly 30 years, a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice. Meanwhile, Aurora struggled to reconcile the relief of resolution with the lasting shadows of the past. The town's streets, once scarred by uncertainty, now carried a quiet vigilance, an awareness of what could be lurking beneath the surface. Residents recounted small, forgotten incidents from the early 90s, glimpses of a stranger, unexplained noises, fleeting suspicions, and realized the extent to which danger had quietly threaded through their lives. The community, simultaneously relieved and unsettled, recognized that while justice had been served, the psychological imprint of the past could not be erased. Community gatherings, vigils, and memorials for Emily became spaces of collective catharsis. Candles flickered against the night, reflecting in tear-filled eyes. Speeches were brief, yet resonant, emphasizing remembrance over grief, acknowledgement over despair. Emily's story, once shrouded in uncertainty, now served as a catalyst for communal solidarity. Parents shared strategies for keeping children safe. Neighbors exchanged stories of vigilance, and the town, slowly, began to reclaim a sense of security while honoring the shadow of loss that had shaped it for decades. Detective Jensen, reflecting on the case, emphasized persistence, attention to detail, and unwavering commitment. He recounted the long nights, the moments of doubt, the frustrating dead ends. Each memory, each failed lead, had contributed to the ultimate resolution. He spoke of hope tempered by patience, of the moral imperative to continue even when the odds seemed insurmountable. For him, the case was more than a resolution. It was an affirmation that truth, no matter how deeply buried, could emerge if pursued relentlessly. Even with closure, the community remained alert, shaped by the experience of living alongside unresolved horror. Streets once traversed carelessly were now met with watchful eyes. Neighbors spoke more openly about unusual behavior, subtle signals, and fleeting incidents that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Aurora had learned, in the most painful way possible, the price of inattentiveness, the fragility of assumed safety, and the enduring value of vigilance in preserving life against unseen threats. Psychological impact studies of the case became reference points for law enforcement and community organizations nationwide. The enduring effects of uncertainty, the slow burn of fear, the pervasive tension across years of unresolved crime were documented and analyzed. Emily's case provided not just closure, but insight into human behavior, into community dynamics, into the delicate balance between safety and exposure. Her story, though tragic, offered lessons that transcended time, geography, and circumstance, illuminating the profound implications of unsolved crimes on human lives and societal structures. Aurora's residents gradually resumed routines, though altered by memory and vigilance. Schoolchildren learned safety strategies, adults checked in on neighbors, and local businesses installed improved security measures. The city had evolved in response to terror, molding its collective consciousness around the lessons of the past. Emily's disappearance had imprinted itself on every corner, every alley, every streetlight, transforming ordinary locations into markers of memory and caution. And yet, amid the procedural closure, the trials, the forensic breakthroughs, the city could not erase the absence of a young woman whose life had been stolen in the shadows. The quiet streets still carried the intangible weight of that September night in 1991. Every reflective surface, every whisper of wind, every flicker of a neon sign seemed to echo the vanished footsteps, the interrupted laughter, the life that had been cut short. Justice might have been served, answers delivered. Yet Aurora remained a city subtly haunted, shaped irrevocably by the chilling persistence of a crime that had once seemed unsolvable. The city of Aurora woke slowly, but the air carried a residue of unease, a memory of terror so deeply etched it seemed to hover over every street corner. Even as police chalked lines on the pavement, As journalists photographed alleys and crosswalks, the town moved cautiously, shadows lengthened, and ordinary routines felt suspended under the weight of recollection. For nearly 3 decades, Emily Carson's disappearance had remained a spectral presence, a constant reminder that the ordinary could conceal extraordinary violence. Now, the truth had surfaced, but the echoes of those long years refused to vanish. Margaret Carson often found herself wandering the city alone, retracing the paths Emily had once taken, searching for fragments of a life interrupted. Each bench, each lamppost, each familiar storefront carried memories frozen in time. She remembered the crisp autumn night when Emily vanished, the flickering neon signs reflecting on wet asphalt, the scent of roasted coffee lingering in the air, the way her daughter's hair glimmered under the streetlights. These recollections, once painful and raw, now mingled with the clarity of truth, intensifying both grief and relief. For Margaret, closure was a fragile thing, a thin sheet of glass over years of darkness, offering light, but also revealing the depth of what had been lost. Thomas Carson, equally haunted, delved into old documents, notebooks filled with police observations, witness statements, and media clippings. For years, he had kept meticulous records of his daughter's life, cross-referencing every known detail with possible sightings, every rumor with factual evidence. Now, the arrest and trial provided answers, but his mind lingered on the years when no answers existed. Each missed clue, each delayed call, each fleeting suspicion that went unspoken haunted him like ghosts pacing the halls of memory. He thought of the perpetrator, calm, calculating, hidden among ordinary faces for decades, and wondered how many more lives might have been endangered by similar oversight. The trial itself became a spectacle, both legal and emotional. Courtrooms, packed with journalists, community members, and family, witnessed the chilling recounting of events. Forensic experts detailed the intricate evidence, the fibers, the trace DNA, the microscopic remnants that tied the perpetrator to the crime. Witnesses recounted decades-old memories, long dismissed as insignificant, now revealed as critical pieces of a complex puzzle. Each detail, however small, reconstructed the horror of that night, painting an unflinching portrait of violence executed with cold precision. The community listened, rapt and trembling, as decades of silence were converted into undeniable testimony. Detective Jensen, now in the final months of his career, returned repeatedly to the scene. He examined crosswalks, sidewalks, alleyways, and overgrown pathways, cataloging every shadow, every reflection, every forgotten object. The streets seemed to respond to his presence, echoes of the past unfolding in subtle ways. Discarded wrappers that had lingered for decades, faint indentations in dirt, remnants of disturbances overlooked in 1991. To him, every piece mattered. Every fragment contributed to the mosaic of truth finally assembled. The satisfaction of closure was tempered by the knowledge of years lost, of lives changed irreparably by uncertainty and fear. As the trial progressed, the perpetrator's demeanor unnerved all who observed him. Calm, methodical, and eerily precise, he recounted his actions with the detachment of someone who had rehearsed his story for decades. The courtroom air felt thick, oppressive, a silent tension pressing on every listener. Each word underscored the meticulous planning, the patient observation, the calculated steps taken to ensure Emily could not escape. The horror was amplified by the realization that such evil could hide in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment, exploiting trust and routine. The community grappled with disbelief and revulsion, trying to reconcile the ordinary with the extraordinary violence that had unfolded beneath their awareness. Aurora itself became a study in collective memory. Streets once traversed carelessly were now paths of vigilance. Parents walked children to school with caution previously unimagined. Neighbors exchanged subtle warnings, reporting unfamiliar faces, noting odd patterns of behavior, establishing networks of awareness that had been absent decades before. The town, scarred but resilient, had transformed its own culture of safety, shaped irrevocably by a crime that had once seemed unsolvable. Emily's absence had redefined normalcy, embedding lessons in vigilance that would persist across generations. Psychologists and social researchers weighed in, examining the long-term impact of unresolved disappearance. Children who had grown up during Emily's absence exhibited subtle markers of anxiety, hyperawareness, and mistrust. Adults recounted recurring nightmares, intrusive memories, a persistent sense of unease in familiar spaces. The phenomenon, termed ambient grief, described a pervasive psychological tension that quietly influenced everyday behavior. Emily's story had become more than a cold case. It had become a blueprint for understanding the societal impact of unresolved trauma, a stark demonstration of how absence and silence can echo across decades, altering the fabric of a community. The legal proceedings brought additional revelations. Newly discovered records of the perpetrator's employment, financial transactions, and personal connections revealed a complex web of premeditation. Each subtle act, a delayed phone call, a misdirected letter, a routine observed, unfolded as a piece of the broader pattern. Investigators traced his movements across Aurora with precision, confirming suspicions that had remained dormant for nearly 30 years. The realization of just how calculated the crime had been struck fear into the hearts of those who had once believed it to be random, an unfortunate accident of circumstance. As verdict day approached, tension gripped the community. Families, journalists, and citizens gathered outside the courthouse, awaiting confirmation that justice, long delayed, would finally be served. Margaret and Thomas Carson remained composed outwardly, yet their eyes betrayed decades of grief, fear, and longing. When the gavel fell and the perpetrator was convicted, there was a collective exhale, a release that had been postponed for far too long. Yet even in relief, there remained a residual unease, a recognition that justice, however necessary, could not fully restore what had been lost. The community sought closure in other ways. Memorials were held, candles lit, flowers laid at the site near the train tracks where the duffel bag had been discovered. Speeches were brief but heartfelt, emphasizing remembrance, honor, and the resilience of human memory. Emily's story, now widely known, became a symbol of persistence, of the unyielding pursuit of truth, and of the long arc of justice. Residents recounted moments of insight, reflecting on small details they had once overlooked, now understood as critical warnings, urging vigilance in everyday life. Detective Jensen, reflecting on the decades-long investigation, emphasized the human element of persistence. The painstaking analysis of evidence, the careful revisiting of witnesses, the integration of new technology, all had combined to deliver resolution. He spoke of the moral imperative to continue, of the necessity of patience, and the ethical responsibility to pursue truth, no matter how long it took. In his account, Emily's life became a testament not only to loss, but also to the resilience of those committed to justice, the refusal to let darkness remain unchecked. Even after the trial, the town of Aurora remained subtly altered. Streets, alleys, and neighborhoods retained a heightened awareness, a cautious mindfulness shaped by decades of living under the shadow of uncertainty. Community initiatives, neighborhood watches, and local safety programs were implemented, institutionalizing lessons learned through tragedy. Parents shared guidance on recognizing unusual behaviors. Neighbors observed subtle patterns, and the city slowly rebuilt its sense of security while carrying forward the memory of the events that had forever changed it. The psychological footprint of Emily's disappearance continued to ripple outward. Survivors of similar cases reached out, finding solidarity in shared trauma, validation in the persistence of investigators, and inspiration in the eventual resolution. Aurora became a case study for the long-term consequences of unresolved crime, demonstrating both the destructive potential of silence and the transformative power of truth revealed, even decades later. Emily's story, while tragic, had become a beacon, highlighting the intersection of memory, justice, and human resilience. In private moments, the Carson family reflected on the complexity of closure. Truth, finally available, brought both solace and renewed grief. Margaret Carson would often gaze at Emily's photograph, the light catching her eyes in ways that seemed almost alive, and feel a mixture of loss and relief. Thomas Carson revisited old notes, photographs, and correspondence, realizing that each document represented not only the absence of his daughter, but also the persistence of hope, patience, and human perseverance. Their grief had transformed into a vigilant remembrance, a commitment to honor Emily's memory through recognition, awareness, and care. Aurora's streets, once silent witnesses, now carried a duality of memory, grief tempered by vigilance, sorrow balanced with lessons learned. Each passerby, consciously or subconsciously, moved with awareness, a subtle acknowledgement that ordinary spaces could conceal danger, and that attentiveness was both protection and homage to those lost. The city had internalized the impact of the crime, embedding safety and caution into the very fabric of communal life. Despite the resolution, the emotional resonance lingered. Memories of Emily, of her laughter, of her presence, remained vivid in those who had known her. Photographs, letters, and personal mementos became anchors in a reality shaped by absence, guiding the community in remembrance. Aurora had changed irrevocably, but through the pain, the city had learned, adapted, and endured, a testament to the enduring interplay of memory, justice, and collective resilience. And so, even as life resumed its patterns, the shadow of September 12, 1991, stretched quietly across Aurora. Neon lights flickered against wet asphalt. The train tracks remained a silent monument. The streets carried whispers of the past. Emily Carson's story, though resolved in legal terms, continued to resonate, a haunting reminder that absence and silence leave marks deeper than time can heal. Justice had arrived at last, but memory, unrelenting and exacting, endured, an echo through the city, a warning, a tribute, a lingering presence in every corner where her footsteps had once fallen. Even with the verdict delivered, Aurora remained suspended between relief and unease, a town haunted not just by the crime itself, but by the decades it had remained unresolved. The streets whispered secrets of the past, shadows lingering where Emily Carson's footsteps had once tread. Parents walked children to school with heightened awareness. Neighbors glanced warily at strangers, and the diner where Emily had worked became a quiet monument, her favorite stool still empty, her mug forever resting where she had left it. The city moved cautiously, a collective memory woven into everyday life, each street lamp and sidewalk etched with the invisible imprint of trauma. Margaret Carson often wandered to the train tracks, the site where the duffel bag had been found, a place that had become a symbol of both horror and revelation. The ground was uneven, littered with years of debris, but she traced the contours carefully, remembering how her daughter had vanished in the shadows. She imagined Emily walking along that path, unaware of the danger that stalked her, unaware of the meticulous planning that had ensured she could not escape. Each memory was sharp, vivid, and painful, a reminder that truth, while finally uncovered, could not erase the absence. She touched the cold steel of the tracks, imagining the echo of footsteps long gone, a lingering imprint on the fabric of time itself. Detective Jensen, retired but still deeply involved, returned to his old office to review files one last time. Photographs, evidence logs, and witness statements lay spread across his desk, a mosaic of persistence, frustration, and ultimate resolution. He recalled the early days of the investigation, the empty streets, the lack of evidence, the desperate calls from Emily's parents, the haunting sense that something was missing but impossible to pinpoint. Each failed lead, each overlooked clue, had been a test of patience and resolve, a trial of the human capacity to persist in the face of uncertainty. Now, with the case closed, he reflected on the immense weight carried by those who had waited for decades, the profound patience required to bring justice to fruition. The perpetrator, now in custody, had begun to reveal facets of his life that had remained hidden for decades. Investigators pieced together his movements, routines, and connections with chilling clarity. Employment records, financial transactions, and mundane daily behaviors revealed a pattern of observation and calculated patience. Each detail underscored the deliberate nature of his crimes, the way he had embedded himself unnoticed into the fabric of the city, exploiting familiarity and routine to execute a plan that would leave a community blinded for nearly 30 years. The coldness of his methodology shocked not just the police but the community at large. demonstrating the subtlety with which evil can operate under the guise of normality. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense and electric. Prosecutors presented evidence with precision, recounting timelines, locations, and behaviors that had previously eluded investigators. Forensic experts testified to the microscopic traces of Emily's presence in the duffel bag and on other surfaces, reconstructing the final hours with painstaking accuracy. Witnesses recounted long-forgotten observations, glances, unusual behaviors, fleeting incidents that suddenly became critical pieces of a broader puzzle. Each revelation compounded the horror, demonstrating the calculated orchestration of a crime that had remained hidden in plain sight for decades. Aurora's citizens watched closely, absorbing every detail, grappling with disbelief and relief. Old memories resurfaced, strange vehicles on quiet streets, fleeting shadows in alleyways, unexplained noises that had been dismissed at the time. Adults recalled conversations with children who had been terrified. Neighbors remembered glances and gestures that now assumed ominous significance. The collective memory of the community became a living archive, a reflection of the tension, fear, and vigilance cultivated over decades. Emily's absence had left a void not just in her family's life, but across the city, a persistent hum of anxiety embedded in the rhythms of daily existence. Margaret and Thomas Carson attended every session of the trial, their presence a silent assertion of humanity against the procedural mechanisms of law. Margaret's eyes remained fixed on the defendant, searching for signs of remorse, while Thomas held photographs and personal mementos of Emily, tangible reminders of a life interrupted. Their grief, tempered by decades of uncertainty, was transformed into a form of endurance, a quiet resilience that spoke louder than any testimony. Each day of the trial allowed them to confront the truth directly, to witness the meticulous reconstruction of events, and to finally begin integrating closure into their lives. As the proceedings unfolded, investigators discovered additional corroborative evidence that had been overlooked for years. Surveillance photos from nearby businesses, handwritten notes, and fragments of personal correspondence illuminated a pattern of stalking and manipulation. The perpetrator had monitored Emily, studied her routines, and adapted his movements to ensure no intervention. Each revelation deepened the horror while simultaneously offering resolution, a paradoxical mixture of dread and relief. The investigation, once frozen in time, now moved with a rapidity enabled by modern technology, reconstructing decades-old events with unprecedented clarity. The city itself became an active participant in remembrance. Streets were patrolled with heightened vigilance. Neighbors exchanged observations with renewed seriousness, and safety protocols were implemented in schools, businesses, and residential areas. The memory of Emily's disappearance informed new behaviors, shaping a collective consciousness attuned to danger while honoring the life that had been lost. Aurora, scarred by history, began to forge a fragile equilibrium, balancing vigilance with the tentative return to normalcy. Psychologists examined the long-term impact on those who had lived through the unresolved crime. Children who had grown up under the shadow of Emily's absence exhibited subtle markers of anxiety, hypervigilance, and mistrust. Adults described recurring nightmares, intrusive memories, and a persistent unease in familiar spaces. The phenomenon, termed ambient grief, illustrated the pervasive psychological effects of unsolved crime, highlighting the ways in which trauma could shape a community over decades. Emily's story became more than a narrative of justice. It was a lens through which the human experience of loss, uncertainty, and resilience could be understood. As verdict day approached, tension in Aurora reached a peak. Citizens gathered outside the courthouse, waiting for the final resolution, their emotions taut with anticipation. Margaret and Thomas Carson, at the heart of this collective tension, felt the culmination of decades of fear, hope, and persistence. When the verdict was delivered, confirming the conviction of the perpetrator, the city exhaled collectively. Relief mingled with lingering grief. Closure had arrived, yet the emotional imprint of nearly 30 years of uncertainty remained palpable. Memorials and vigils provided spaces for public expression of grief and remembrance. Candles flickered in the night, flowers were laid at key sites, and speeches emphasized remembrance, honor, and resilience. Emily's story, once a source of despair and fear, became a catalyst for communal solidarity. Residents reflected on lessons learned, the importance of vigilance, and the necessity of community engagement. Aurora had transformed its understanding of safety, embedding the memory of loss into practical awareness, ensuring that Emily's absence would continue to influence behavior and consciousness. Detective Jensen reflected on the investigation as a testament to perseverance. Years of meticulous work, repeated reviews of evidence, and the integration of modern forensic technology had culminated in resolution. He emphasized the moral imperative of sustained inquiry, the necessity of patience, and the ethical responsibility to pursue truth regardless of temporal obstacles. In recounting the case, he highlighted the importance of memory, persistence, and vigilance, framing Emily's life and loss as both a cautionary tale and a demonstration of the potential for justice, however delayed. Even with legal resolution, Aurora remained subtly altered. Streets, neighborhoods, and public spaces carried a heightened awareness, a mindfulness shaped by decades of unresolved fear. Community programs, neighborhood watches, and safety initiatives institutionalized lessons learned through tragedy. The city had integrated experience into policy, memory into action, and grief into practical vigilance. Emily's absence had not only demanded justice, but had also compelled a reevaluation of communal responsibility, safety, and attentiveness. The emotional legacy persisted. Photographs, letters, and mementos of Emily remained potent symbols for her family and community. Her presence, though absent physically, was maintained through memory, reflection, and ritual. Aurora, while continuing daily life, remained conscious of the persistent imprint of trauma, recognizing that while justice had been delivered, the emotional and psychological echoes would endure. Each corner, each shadow, each flicker of light carried memory, reflection, and vigilance, reinforcing lessons hard learned and ensuring that Emily's story continued to shape the consciousness of the city. As autumn settled over the town, the wind carried whispers of a time long past. The train tracks, still silent, marked the boundary between memory and reality. Streets reflected neon and amber light, each shadow hinting at the events that had unfolded decades before. Emily's story, though legally resolved, remained alive in consciousness, a haunting reminder of absence, loss, and the persistence of human memory. Aurora had emerged from the long shadow of uncertainty, transformed yet scarred, a city forever imprinted by one September night in 1991. The trial had ended, the verdict delivered, yet the city of Aurora remained unsettled, its streets whispering the long-forgotten steps of Emily Carson. Though justice had finally been administered, the shadows of 1991 clung to every corner, every lamppost, every cracked sidewalk. Parents walked children with quiet vigilance. Neighbors exchanged wary glances, and the diner where Emily had worked seemed suspended in time. The coffee machine silent in memory, her favorite stool still empty. The city had absorbed the trauma like a scar beneath the surface, permanent and subtle, a reminder that closure did not erase absence. Margaret Carson rose early, each morning a ritual of remembrance. She walked the streets Emily had once known, breathing in the crisp autumn air, noting the shifting shadows, tracing the patterns of light across pavement and alleyway. Her gaze lingered on ordinary objects, a rusted bicycle chained to a fence, a cracked window, a faded crosswalk line, and she remembered how her daughter had moved through these spaces, so alive, so unaware of the lurking danger. The weight of decades pressed against her chest, a constant reminder that answers, though welcome, could not restore the lost years. Thomas Carson, equally consumed, returned to old evidence folders, revisiting photographs, maps, and witness statements. Each document, once a source of frustration, now became a piece of vindication. He traced the movements of the perpetrator with meticulous care, imagining the strategies and observations that had allowed the crime to remain undetected for nearly 3 decades. Each detail was a testament to human persistence, a chilling reminder of the patience with which evil can operate when unobserved. He marveled at the precision of investigators who had finally connected threads overlooked for years, grateful for the truth yet haunted by the years that had slipped away. Detective Jensen, reflecting from his quiet study, considered the intricate choreography of the investigation. From the original search efforts, the dead-end leads, the forgotten tips, to the modern forensic breakthroughs, each step had contributed to a resolution decades in the making. He recalled nights spent reviewing photographs of empty streets, revisiting crime scenes that had long since returned to normalcy, and the relentless pressure of unanswered questions. Now, closure had been achieved, but the emotional imprint of decades-long uncertainty remained palpable, both in the city and within him. Forensic teams continued to analyze newly discovered evidence. Small details, fibers, hair fragments, trace residues, handwriting, were revisited and confirmed with modern methods, providing an even more precise picture of the night Emily vanished. The duffel bag, once a silent witness, had yielded layers of information previously overlooked. Analysts reconstructed the timeline, confirming movements, corroborating witness accounts, and mapping the perpetrator's careful planning. The precision, patience, and cold calculation of his actions emerged in stark relief, a chilling insight into how someone could operate unnoticed for so long, exploiting ordinary trust and routine. Aurora's residents found themselves reflecting on their own neighborhoods. The streets where children had played became arenas of heightened attention. Parents shared observations, noting unusual behaviors, reporting odd vehicles, and discussing interactions that previously might have been dismissed. Community meetings addressed safety protocols, neighborhood watches, and educational initiatives for families, creating a culture of vigilance that had been absent in 1991. Emily's disappearance had reshaped communal consciousness, embedding lessons of awareness, accountability, and collective responsibility. The psychological impact on the Carson family and the broader community was profound. Therapists and social researchers studied ambient grief, noting the subtle, pervasive anxiety that had persisted for decades. Children who had grown up during Emily's disappearance displayed hypervigilance and mistrust, while adults recounted recurring nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and heightened alertness in ordinary situations. Emily's story had become a lens through which the human experience of unresolved trauma could be examined, a vivid illustration of the ripple effects that a single unresolved crime could produce over time and across generations. Courtroom revelations continued to dominate discussions. Additional evidence, including employment records, travel logs, and personal communications, revealed the meticulous attention the perpetrator paid to Emily's routines. Investigators confirmed periods of surveillance, observation, and subtle manipulation, illustrating the methodical nature of his actions. Witnesses recalled minor incidents, glimpses of a van, fleeting encounters, unusual questions, that, in hindsight, foreshadowed the horror of that night. Each revelation compounded the horror while reinforcing the painstaking diligence that finally brought resolution. Aurora remained a city transformed. Streets once taken for granted now carried subtle signals of awareness. Children walked under careful supervision, neighbors exchanged routine check-ins, and local businesses implemented improved safety measures. The city had internalized the lessons of 1991, embedding vigilance into its cultural DNA. Emily's absence had catalyzed change, ensuring that future generations would navigate the streets with eyes open, attuned to subtle signals, mindful of the ordinary dangers that could lurk unnoticed. The emotional weight for the Carson family persisted. Margaret often lingered at memorials, candles flickering in the dusk as she recounted her daughter's laughter, her voice, her presence. Thomas revisited photographs and personal mementos, understanding that memory could sustain life even when absence dominated reality. The family's grief, transformed into quiet resilience, became a testament to human endurance, illustrating how love and memory could withstand even decades of uncertainty and loss. Detective Jensen emphasized the importance of lessons learned. Persistence, patience, and attention to detail had been critical in unraveling decades-old events. The integration of modern forensic technology, careful review of witness statements, and reevaluation of evidence had allowed investigators to reconstruct the crime with precision. In recounting the investigation, he highlighted the delicate interplay of memory, observation, and methodical analysis, underscoring the fact that justice, though delayed, could eventually prevail when human dedication remained steadfast. Even with the perpetrator convicted, Aurora remained subtly alert. Streets, alleys, and public spaces were now places of careful observation. Community programs, neighborhood watches, and school safety initiatives were implemented to ensure vigilance became an ongoing practice. The city had transformed trauma into action, grief into awareness, and absence into a guiding presence that shaped behavior, informed decisions, and reinforced communal responsibility. Emily's story had become both a warning and a guide, embedding vigilance into the very fabric of daily life. As autumn deepened, the environment mirrored the lingering tension of memory. Wind rustled through the trees along the train tracks, scattering leaves across the pavement where Emily had vanished. Neon signs flickered in the distance, casting ephemeral reflections across wet asphalt, creating shadows that danced like echoes of the past. Every sound, the distant whistle of a train, the faint hum of traffic, the click of footsteps, seemed magnified, carrying with it the weight of decades of uncertainty and fear. The city, though relieved, remained haunted by the subtle presence of history and memory, a quiet reminder that some shadows linger longer than expected. Psychologists continued to explore the enduring effects of unresolved trauma on a community, highlighting the importance of long-term support and intervention. Aurora became a reference for studies in ambient grief, vigilance, and the societal impact of cold cases. The town's transformation, from a place of casual trust to a city of conscious awareness, served as a model for other communities grappling with unresolved disappearances and crimes. Emily's story, while tragic, illuminated the resilience of human systems, both familial and communal, in adapting to trauma while honoring the memory of those lost. The Carson family's engagement with the community intensified. They participated in memorials, public speaking events, and awareness campaigns. Margaret and Thomas shared their experience not merely as victims, but as advocates, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, persistence, and memory. Their story inspired policy changes, community initiatives, and educational programs, creating a living legacy in Emily's name. Through their efforts, the family transformed grief into action, absence into influence, and memory into a force for communal protection and vigilance. Even in private moments, the weight of the past remained palpable. Margaret often sat by the window, looking down the streets Emily had walked, recalling her daughter's laughter, her gestures, her energy. Thomas reviewed old documents, revisiting details with a mixture of grief and admiration for the investigative process. Each memory, though painful, reinforced the permanence of Emily's presence in their lives, her story shaping every decision, every reflection, and every movement within the family's orbit. Aurora's identity had shifted. The city moved with a quiet awareness, an invisible thread connecting past trauma with present vigilance. Streets were observed, alleys monitored, and ordinary routines tempered with cautious attention. Community engagement ensured that lessons learned from Emily's disappearance endured, creating a culture where absence was remembered, vulnerability mitigated, and vigilance institutionalized. The shadow of the crime, though legally resolved, persisted as a moral and practical guide for the living. Even as closure was achieved, the emotional landscape of the city remained textured with memory and reflection. The trial, the arrest, and the forensic revelations had delivered justice, yet the subtle tension of absence continued to shape daily life. Residents walked carefully, observed routinely, and remembered silently, their behaviors informed by the long arc of unresolved fear finally brought to resolution. Emily's story, though concluded in the courts, lived in consciousness, in memory, and in the careful attention of a community forever altered. Margaret and Thomas Carson found solace in remembrance and action. Their grief, tempered by decades of uncertainty, had evolved into vigilance and advocacy. Photographs, letters, and mementos became touchstones, sustaining memory and connection. Aurora's residents, guided by lessons learned from trauma, engaged with streets, schools, and neighborhoods with heightened awareness, ensuring that the legacy of Emily's disappearance informed both culture and policy. The city, scarred yet resilient, carried forward a blend of mourning and action, memory and protection, reflection and vigilance. As night fell over Aurora, the train tracks lay silent, the streets dimly lit by flickering lamps. Shadows stretched long across pavement, echoing the passage of decades. Every wind gust, every distant hum, every flicker of neon seemed to resonate with the lingering presence of a girl whose life had been stolen, whose story had captivated, horrified, and ultimately reshaped a city. Justice had arrived, yet memory remained, persistent and unyielding, a force binding the past, the present, and the ongoing vigilance of a community forever changed by the events of September 1991. Even after the trial, Aurora breathed uneasily, the weight of decades-long uncertainty refusing to dissipate entirely. The city streets, familiar yet uncanny, seemed to hold their breath, carrying echoes of Emily Carson's final steps. The diner where she had worked remained almost sacred, a quiet monument to absence. Her favorite stool, a mug permanently in place, and the faint scuff marks on the linoleum floor told stories no one could fully articulate. Residents moved cautiously, their routines subtly altered by memory, awareness, and the invisible scars of a crime that had stretched through time without resolution. Margaret Carson often lingered along the sidewalks Emily had traversed, tracing the patterns of a life interrupted. She would stop at the crosswalk near the train tracks, remembering the way her daughter had paused, the glimmer of hope in her eyes, the laughter that once filled the streets. The memory was vivid, almost tangible, yet it carried with it the unbearable weight of loss. Each step she took along these familiar paths was a delicate negotiation between grief and remembrance, a quiet ritual that allowed her to honor Emily while confronting the emptiness left behind. Thomas Carson immersed himself in records and photographs, revisiting evidence with meticulous care. Witness statements, police reports, forensic analyses, all were examined repeatedly, cross-referenced, and reimagined. He traced the perpetrator's movements, imagining the patience and precision that had enabled him to remain hidden for decades. Each detail reinforced the horror, the cold methodical planning, the exploitation of familiarity. Yet, within the grim calculus of investigation, Thomas also found a measure of relief, clarity, understanding, and the validation of years of persistent anguish. Detective Jensen, now retired, reflected on the layers of the investigation. From the earliest searches, the frustrating dead ends, the overlooked tips, to the modern forensic breakthroughs, the path to resolution had been arduous, meticulous, and unforgiving. Nights spent reviewing photographs, revisiting crime scenes, and reconciling conflicting accounts had finally borne fruit. He understood the weight carried by families, communities, and individuals living with uncertainty for decades. Closure had arrived, yet the emotional imprint remained, a subtle, persistent reminder of time lost and trust betrayed. The trial had exposed the meticulous orchestration of the crime. Forensic experts outlined the precise methods, the timing, and the calculated behaviors that ensured Emily could not escape. Fibers, DNA, and trace residues were examined with painstaking accuracy, reconstructing a timeline that had been hidden in plain sight for 30 years. Witnesses recounted moments once considered insignificant, a stranger in a van, a fleeting glance, a misdirected question, that now illuminated the perpetrator's patient observation and manipulation. The community listened with bated breath, each revelation deepening the horror while simultaneously affirming the painstaking efforts of those who had pursued truth across decades. Aurora's residents revisited their own memories. Small, previously dismissed events resurfaced with new significance. Children remembered strange vehicles parked too long, fleeting shadows along alleyways, and unsettling encounters with strangers. Parents recalled conversations tinged with fear or confusion. Neighbors recognized subtle behaviors that had seemed innocuous at the time. The collective memory of the city, once fragmented by uncertainty, coalesced into a living archive of caution, awareness, and communal vigilance. Emily's absence had reshaped perception, altering the everyday rhythms of a city long accustomed to casual familiarity. Margaret and Thomas Carson's presence at court was unwavering. Margaret's eyes searched for remorse in the defendant, for even the smallest sign of human decency, while Thomas clutched photographs and personal mementos, anchoring his grief in tangible objects. Their resilience, forged over decades, was a silent assertion of enduring love and unwavering patience. Each day of testimony allowed them to witness the meticulous reconstruction of events, transforming grief into comprehension, uncertainty into understanding, and despair into the fragile relief of closure finally achieved. Even as the case reached resolution, subtle details continued to emerge. Additional evidence, corroborating witness statements, and overlooked documentation filled gaps in the timeline. Employment records, phone logs, and sporadic communications illuminated the extent of the perpetrator's observation and manipulation. Every fragment painted a picture of cold, calculated intent, revealing a pattern of predation that had been meticulously hidden in the ordinary routines of everyday life. The painstaking assembly of decades-old details underscored the diligence, determination, and skill of investigators committed to pursuing truth against extraordinary odds. The city adapted, slowly yet perceptibly, to the lessons imparted by Emily's disappearance. Streets were monitored more closely, neighborhoods established informal watch systems, and families became attuned to the subtle cues of behavior that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Aurora internalized vigilance as a cultural practice, embedding the memory of Emily's absence into daily routines. Ordinary spaces, parks, schools, alleyways, and storefronts became landscapes of awareness, infused with both grief and proactive protection. Emily's story had transformed from tragedy into a guiding principle for safety, awareness, and communal responsibility. The psychological impact endured. Children who had grown up during the period of uncertainty displayed heightened alertness, sensitivity to unusual patterns, and cautious engagement with strangers. Adults recalled dreams, intrusive thoughts, and moments of hypervigilance rooted in long-term exposure to fear and anxiety. Emily's disappearance provided a lens for understanding ambient grief, the slow, invisible ways unresolved trauma can permeate communities and shape behavior across generations. Aurora had become a case study in resilience, adaptation, and the psychological consequences of prolonged uncertainty. For the Carson family, daily life remained intertwined with memory and reflection. Margaret often sat by the window at dusk, recalling Emily's presence in subtle gestures. The way she had tucked hair behind her ear, the tilt of her head when laughing, the casual rhythm of her walk along familiar streets. Thomas reviewed old photographs and letters, finding solace in tangible reminders of Emily's existence, even as the weight of absence remained. Their grief, tempered by the revelation of truth, had evolved into vigilance, advocacy, and careful stewardship of memory. Every action, every reflection, carried the imprint of their daughter's life, ensuring that absence remained meaningful and instructive. Detective Jensen emphasized the human capacity for endurance. Persistence, patience, and meticulous attention had allowed investigators to reconstruct the crime and deliver justice, despite decades of obstacles. The integration of modern technology with decades-old evidence demonstrated the value of methodical analysis and ethical responsibility. In recounting the case, Jensen highlighted the delicate balance between memory, observation, and persistence, underscoring the fact that truth, however delayed, could ultimately prevail when pursued relentlessly. Even with resolution, Aurora remained subtly vigilant. Streets, alleys, and public spaces carried heightened awareness, embedded into the consciousness of residents. Community programs, neighborhood watches, and school initiatives institutionalized lessons learned from decades of trauma. Emily's disappearance had catalyzed the transformation of a city's collective psyche, ensuring that absence, vigilance, and communal responsibility became inseparable elements of daily life. Her story transcended tragedy, offering practical guidance, moral lessons, and an enduring presence that shaped perception and behavior. Autumn deepened, the air crisp and tinged with memory. The train tracks, silent witnesses to Emily's disappearance, reflected the fading sunlight, each gleam an echo of vanished footsteps. Neon lights flickered against wet streets, casting ephemeral shadows across sidewalks, alleys, and intersections. Every sound, the whistle of distant trains, the hum of traffic, the subtle click of footsteps, seemed amplified, reverberating with the weight of decades of uncertainty. Aurora, though relieved, remained haunted by the persistence of memory, an acknowledgement that some shadows could never fully fade, even after justice was served. The Carson family became active in community initiatives, memorials, and advocacy. Margaret and Thomas shared their story widely, emphasizing awareness, persistence, and vigilance. They inspired new protocols, safety measures, and educational programs, embedding lessons learned into the communal fabric. Their grief transformed into action, absence into influence, and memory into a guiding principle for a city learning to navigate both safety and loss. Emily's story became both a cautionary tale and a model of resilience, teaching vigilance while honoring memory. Even in private, the weight of the past lingered. Margaret sat by the window, recalling the cadence of Emily's steps, the inflections in her voice, the energy that had animated her presence. Thomas revisited photographs, letters, and documents, reconciling decades of uncertainty with the clarity of truth. Memory served as a living bridge between absence and presence, grief and endurance, loss and the quiet relief of understanding. Their lives, forever shaped, had integrated both trauma and clarity into a new equilibrium, one where remembrance and vigilance coexisted with slow, deliberate healing. Aurora, transformed yet scarred, carried the lessons of the past forward. Streets once taken for granted became arenas of mindful observation. Schools implemented structured safety programs. Neighborhoods established informal communication networks, and families shared practices of awareness. Emily's disappearance had altered the city's consciousness, creating a culture where vigilance and memory intertwined, where absence imparted lessons, and where community awareness became inseparable from lived experience. The city, shaped by trauma and resolution, had adapted to ensure both safety and remembrance endured. And yet, the emotional resonance remained. Photographs, letters, and mementos of Emily continued to anchor memory, while subtle shadows and reflective surfaces reminded citizens of the invisible traces left by unresolved absence. The trial, the arrest, and the forensic revelations delivered justice, yet memory persisted, shaping thought, perception, and behavior. Aurora remained a city transformed, navigating a balance between relief, vigilance, and the persistent echo of trauma. Emily Carson's story had become a lasting guide, a haunting presence, and a quiet call to awareness woven into the city's fabric. As night fell, the train tracks stretched silent and empty. Streets dimly lit by flickering lamps seemed to carry the weight of history, echoing the presence of a girl whose life had been stolen, whose story had captivated and horrified, and whose legacy now shaped the living. Justice had been achieved, yet memory endured, unyielding and persistent, a force binding the past, present, and future. Aurora had survived, adapted, and endured, forever altered by September 1991, and forever carrying the quiet, unending echo of Emily Carson. Aurora moved cautiously, as though still holding its breath, even with the case closed. The streets, familiar and ordinary, seemed charged with a new awareness. Parents walked children with careful attention, noticing the slightest anomaly in passing strangers. Shopkeepers watched the streets, not just for business but for safety, eye scanning, recording, remembering. The diner, Emily's once frequent haunt, remained a quiet sanctuary. The chair she always sat in, her cup permanently set, became a shrine of memory, a locus of absence, a reminder that justice, though delivered, could never restore what had been lost. Margaret Carson often lingered in those quiet spaces, tracing the familiar cracks in sidewalks, the uneven edges of crosswalks, the places Emily had once paused, once laughed, once moved through life unaware of danger. Each memory carried weight, sharp as broken glass, tender as a photograph pressed to the chest. Margaret felt the years pressing in, the decades of unanswered questions, the months of investigation, the hours of anxiety, but also the fragile relief that came with truth. Closure was imperfect, incomplete, yet undeniable. It was a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark river, solid enough to stand on. Yet beneath it, the water of loss still moved and shifted with every breath. Thomas Carson immersed himself in revisiting the past, not out of obsession, but from a need to understand. He reviewed witness statements, photographs, police logs, and the minutiae of investigation notes. Each small detail, once overlooked or deemed insignificant, now revealed purpose and intent. Every event spotted, every passing glance, every misdirected question coalesced into the portrait of a man who had acted with extraordinary patience, exploiting familiarity and routine to accomplish unspeakable violence. The horror was vivid, real, almost unbearable, but the clarity it provided was a strange comfort, a way to reconcile decades of uncertainty with the finality of truth. Detective Jensen reflected on the tapestry of the case, stretched over 3 decades. He remembered the nights spent pacing the office, reviewing photographs, cross-referencing witness accounts, piecing together events from fragments of memory, intuition, and evidence. The early days had been frustrating: dead-end leads, lost tips, and a city unprepared for the depth of calculation behind Emily's disappearance. The modern forensic techniques, the DNA analysis, microscopic evidence, and advanced record cross-referencing, had allowed investigators to illuminate a story that had remained hidden for 30 years. Resolution was achieved, yet he understood that the emotional imprint of uncertainty lingered, shaping the community, the family, and even the city itself. The trial had exposed the methodical precision of the perpetrator. His calm demeanor, his measured testimony, revealed the cold calculation behind decades of secrecy. Forensic specialists detailed the evidence: fibers, traced DNA, handwritten notes, and residual materials that reconstructed Emily's last hours with chilling accuracy. Witnesses recalled seemingly inconsequential observations: a stranger loitering, an unusual question, a fleeting shadow, that suddenly became critical pieces of understanding. The meticulous orchestration of the crime was laid bare, horrifying the courtroom, while simultaneously demonstrating the relentless diligence of those who refused to let the case remain unresolved. Aurora's citizens could not help but revisit their own memories. Subtle, previously dismissed details resurfaced: the strange van parked too long, a shadow glimpsed in alleyways, an odd question asked by a passerby. The ordinary interactions of daily life were now infused with significance. Residents discussed observations, shared concerns, and collectively reflected on patterns of behavior that once seemed meaningless. The city, scarred yet aware, had absorbed the lessons of Emily's disappearance into its cultural consciousness. Vigilance, awareness, and communal responsibility became intertwined, ensuring that the absence of one life reshaped the collective behaviors of many. The Carson family's presence at court had been unwavering, a silent assertion of resilience and love. Margaret's gaze was fixed on the defendant, seeking any trace of remorse or humanity, while Thomas held photographs and mementos of Emily close, tangible anchors to memory and truth. Their grief, honed over decades, was tempered by understanding, yet remained profound. The slow unraveling of events, the meticulous assembly of decades-old evidence, provided a bittersweet relief, yet it also underscored the long, painful journey of waiting, hoping, and fearing. Even with the case legally resolved, additional revelations continued to emerge. Employment records, phone logs, financial transactions, and sporadic personal communications revealed the perpetrator's extraordinary attention to detail and surveillance. Every step, every decision, every manipulation demonstrated a patient, deliberate orchestration of horror, hidden within the ordinary patterns of life. Investigators, armed with modern tools and decades of dedication, reconstructed the night in vivid detail, illuminating behaviors once invisible and exposing the cold, calculated mind behind the decades of silence. Aurora adapted to the lessons learned. Streets were watched more closely, neighborhoods established informal safety networks, schools implemented structured awareness programs, and families learned to recognize subtle cues of danger. The city internalized vigilance as part of everyday life. Parks, alleys, crosswalks, and storefronts became spaces of awareness, shaped by memory and proactive caution. Emily's story transformed from tragedy into guidance, embedding vigilance into the fabric of daily existence, ensuring that absence was not forgotten and that lessons endured for generations to come. The psychological consequences of decades-long uncertainty were profound. Children who grew up under the shadow of Emily's disappearance displayed heightened sensitivity, hypervigilance, and anxiety. Adults described recurring intrusive thoughts, subtle hyperawareness, and an enduring unease in ordinary spaces. Emily's story became a case study in the pervasive effects of unresolved trauma, demonstrating how a single disappearance could ripple across years, subtly altering perceptions, behaviors, and community dynamics. Aurora, scarred and informed, embodied both the resilience and fragility of a city shaped by long-term trauma. For the Carson family, memory and vigilance became inseparable. Margaret sat quietly in the evenings, recalling Emily's presence in the smallest gestures, the tilt of her head, the swing of her hair, the rhythm of her walk. Thomas revisited photographs, letters, and notes, understanding that memory could sustain a presence even in absence. Their grief, tempered by the clarity of truth, had evolved into cautious endurance, advocacy, and careful stewardship of Emily's legacy. Every decision, every reflection, carried her imprint, ensuring that absence remained significant, instructive, and enduring. Detective Jensen emphasized the importance of human persistence. The combination of methodical investigation, patience, attention to detail, and ethical responsibility had allowed decades-old evidence to yield resolution. Modern technology, applied to historical records, enabled investigators to reconstruct the crime with clarity and precision. The case illustrated the delicate interplay of observation, memory, and persistence, demonstrating that even decades of silence could not prevent justice from eventually emerging. Aurora remained subtly transformed. Streets, neighborhoods, and public spaces carried a heightened awareness, informing daily behaviors and decisions. Community programs institutionalized lessons learned, reinforcing vigilance, awareness, and preparedness. Emily's story had become a guiding principle. Absence taught caution, vigilance was an act of remembrance, and collective awareness ensured that trauma shaped action rather than passivity. The city, scarred and resilient, embodied both caution and remembrance, its identity forever intertwined with the events of 1991. Autumn deepened, the air crisp and tinged with reflection. The train tracks, silent witnesses to the events of decades prior, reflected fading sunlight, each glimmer a silent echo of vanished footsteps. Neon lights flickered against wet streets, casting shadows that stretched long and ghost-like across pavement and alleyways. Every hum of traffic, distant train whistle, and subtle click of footsteps seemed amplified, resonating with the memory of decades of uncertainty. The city, while relieved, remained haunted by the persistence of history, aware that some shadows endure long after justice is served. The Carson family engaged deeply with the community, attending memorials, awareness campaigns, and advocacy programs. Margaret and Thomas shared their story not only to honor Emily, but to educate, inspire, and protect. Their grief became a tool for vigilance, absence a guide for safety, memory a foundation for communal responsibility. Through their efforts, lessons learned were codified into city practices, ensuring that the story of Emily Carson, though tragic, served as a living legacy of awareness, resilience, and care. Even in private, memory remained potent. Margaret sat by windows at dusk, recalling the cadence of Emily's steps, the inflections of her voice, the vitality of her presence. Thomas revisited photographs, notes, and documents, reconciling decades of uncertainty with the clarity of finality. Memory became a bridge connecting absence to presence, grief to endurance, loss to cautious relief. Their lives, irrevocably altered, had integrated trauma and clarity into a new equilibrium, one in which remembrance, vigilance, and reflection coexisted with healing, however tentative. Aurora, transformed yet scarred, carried forward the lessons of history. Streets, neighborhoods, and schools became environments of mindful observation, informal safety networks, and education on awareness. Emily's disappearance had permanently altered the city's consciousness, ensuring that vigilance and memory were inseparable, that absence imparted lessons, and that communal responsibility remained active. The shadow of trauma persisted, but it had been translated into protective action, guiding the living with subtle yet powerful influence. And still, the emotional resonance endured. Photographs, letters, and mementos anchored memory, while subtle environmental cues, the flicker of a neon sign, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the whistle of a distant train, evoked reflection, caution, and remembrance. Justice had been achieved, yet the lessons of trauma remained, embedded into consciousness, shaping decisions, perceptions, and communal behavior. Aurora, forever altered, continued to navigate a balance between relief, vigilance, and memory, carrying the quiet, unending echo of Emily Carson's life and disappearance. Even with justice served, Aurora felt smaller, heavier, as if the memory of Emily Carson's absence had seeped into the very walls of the city. Streets carried echoes of steps that were never retraced, alleys held shadows too long unnoticed, and the subtle hum of everyday life seemed to vibrate with the weight of decades-long fear. Parents guided children with a quiet urgency. Neighbors exchanged wary glances, and the diner where Emily had spent so many hours remained a solemn memorial. The chair she always sat in, her coffee mug ever present, became a quiet shrine. Her absence was tangible, a presence in itself, a reminder that truth, while powerful, could not undo loss. Margaret Carson often wandered the familiar streets in solitude, retracing the path Emily had walked countless times. She would stop at the edge of the train tracks, fingers tracing the cold metal, imagining her daughter moving through the shadows, unaware of the danger that would strike. Each memory, vivid and sharp, pressed against the chest like a physical weight. Margaret felt the years, the long nights of worry, the months of pleading for leads, the decades of unanswered questions, but also the fragile relief that came with truth. Closure was imperfect, a thin layer over a vast, dark river of grief, yet it provided direction in a life that had been suspended for far too long. Thomas Carson immersed himself in the details of the investigation once more. He pored over photographs, witness statements, forensic reports, and timelines, retracing the meticulous orchestration of the perpetrator. Every small detail, once overlooked, a fleeting glance, a van parked suspiciously, an unusual interaction, revealed a calculated, patient orchestration. Horror mingled with clarity, the realization that a life could be stolen with such precision, the ordinary routines exploited with meticulous care. Yet clarity brought its own form of solace, transforming years of uncertainty into a framework of understanding, a path toward integrating absence into lived experience. Detective Jensen reflected on the enormity of the case, the decades of dedication required to bring resolution. He remembered the early days, walking the streets, revisiting crime scenes, and piecing together fragments of evidence that seemed disconnected. Dead ends, mislaid tips, and incomplete recollections had made the case almost impossible to solve. Modern forensic breakthroughs, applied to preserved evidence, had illuminated the pattern of calculated patience and cold intent. Jensen understood that closure did not erase trauma. It simply reframed it. The city, the family, and even the investigators themselves would carry the imprint of decades-long uncertainty for the rest of their lives. The courtroom had revealed the depth of the perpetrator's calculation. Forensic experts meticulously detailed the evidence. Fibers, traced DNA, handwriting, and residual materials reconstructed the last hours with horrifying precision. Witnesses recalled events that had seemed insignificant: a stranger in a van, a passing glance, a question asked casually, that now became essential pieces of understanding. The methodical orchestration of the crime, once invisible, was laid bare. The horror of its precision shook the courtroom, but it also underscored the relentless dedication of investigators who refused to let time obscure the truth. Aurora's residents could not help but revisit their own memories. Strange vehicles, fleeting shadows, and odd interactions resurfaced in collective consciousness. Ordinary events of 1991 gained new significance. Parents recalled conversations tinged with fear, neighbors reflected on behaviors previously dismissed. The city's memory had become a living archive, its residents more aware, more cautious, more vigilant. Emily's absence had left an indelible mark, reshaping perception and behavior, embedding lessons into daily life that would endure for generations. Margaret and Thomas Carson remained pillars of quiet strength. Margaret's gaze, unwavering in the courtroom, sought any sign of remorse in the defendant, while Thomas clutched photographs and mementos, anchors to memory and truth. Their grief, honed over decades, had evolved into patience and endurance. Witnessing the reconstruction of events, the unveiling of hidden patterns, and the meticulous detailing of evidence offered bittersweet relief, a mixture of validation and pain. The slow unfolding of truth after decades of uncertainty was exhausting, yet necessary. Even after the legal proceedings, additional revelations continued to emerge. Employment records, phone logs, sporadic communications, and financial transactions illuminated the perpetrator's extraordinary patience and surveillance. Each new detail revealed a man who had studied Emily, anticipated behaviors, and manipulated circumstances with relentless precision. The methodical nature of his actions, hidden in the ordinariness of daily life, revealed a chilling mind, a predator concealed within routine. Investigators, armed with modern forensic tools, reconstructed decades-old events, exposing behaviors invisible to the casual observer but devastating in their consequences. Aurora adapted, slowly but profoundly. Streets became places of conscious observation, neighborhoods established informal safety networks, schools implemented vigilance programs, and families learned to recognize subtle signs of danger. Memory had been transformed into action, absence into caution. The city absorbed the lessons of Emily's disappearance, embedding vigilance into everyday life. Parks, alleys, and storefronts became spaces of awareness, shaped by memory and proactive measures. Emily's story, once a source of despair, now served as a blueprint for safety and communal responsibility. The psychological consequences of decades-long uncertainty were pervasive. Children who grew up under the shadow of Emily's disappearance displayed heightened awareness, anxiety, and sensitivity to unusual behaviors. Adults recounted recurring nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and hypervigilance in ordinary spaces. Emily's story became a lens for understanding ambient grief, a study in how trauma could subtly reshape a community over decades. Aurora emerged as a city both scarred and resilient, a living testament to the human capacity to adapt while carrying the weight of memory. For the Carson family, memory and vigilance became inseparable. Margaret spent quiet evenings recalling Emily's subtle gestures, the rhythm of her movements, the inflections of her voice. Thomas revisited photographs, letters, and evidence, understanding that memory could sustain presence even in absence. Their grief, tempered by the clarity of truth, evolved into endurance, advocacy, and the careful stewardship of Emily's legacy. Every action, every decision, every reflection carried her imprint, ensuring absence remained meaningful, instructive, and enduring. Detective Jensen emphasized the value of persistence. Decades of investigation, patience, and meticulous attention had brought clarity to events long obscured. Modern technology, applied to preserved evidence, allowed investigators to reconstruct the crime with unprecedented accuracy. The case demonstrated the delicate balance of observation, memory, and ethical responsibility, showing that even decades of silence could not prevent justice from ultimately prevailing. Aurora, subtly transformed, carried the lessons forward. Streets, neighborhoods, and schools became spaces of mindful observation. Informal networks and safety initiatives institutionalized vigilance. Emily's story became a guiding principle. Absence taught caution, memory informed vigilance, and community responsibility became inseparable from everyday life. The city had learned to navigate both trauma and resolution, embedding awareness into the culture, ensuring the lessons of 1991 were never forgotten. Autumn deepened, bringing crisp air and fading light. The train tracks, silent witnesses to the past, reflected the diminishing sun, each gleam a whisper of vanished footsteps. Neon lights flickered against wet streets, casting elongated shadows across sidewalks, alleys, and intersections. Every hum of traffic, Every distant train whistle, every subtle click of footsteps seemed amplified, resonating with the memory of decades of uncertainty. Aurora, while relieved, remained haunted by the persistence of history, aware that some shadows endure even after justice is served. The Carson family immersed themselves in community remembrance. They participated in memorials, public talks, and advocacy programs, ensuring Emily's story would educate, protect, and inspire. Their grief became a tool for vigilance, absence a lesson for safety, memory a guiding principle. Through their efforts, lessons learned were codified into practice, ensuring Emily's life and story influenced generations beyond her own. Their advocacy transformed tragedy into a living legacy of resilience, awareness, and caution. Even in private, the weight of memory persisted. Margaret often gazed out the window at familiar streets, recalling Emily's laughter, gestures, and vitality. Thomas revisited photographs and documents, reconciling decades of uncertainty with the clarity of resolution. Memory became a bridge, connecting absence to presence, grief to endurance, loss to the tentative relief of understanding. The family's lives, forever altered, integrated trauma, reflection, and clarity into a fragile equilibrium. Aurora, forever transformed, carried the lessons forward. Streets and neighborhoods became spaces of conscious awareness. Schools, parks, and public venues were infused with lessons learned from absence and trauma. Emily's disappearance had reshaped the city's consciousness, embedding vigilance and memory into the culture. The shadow of past trauma persisted, but it had been transformed into protective action, guiding the living with subtle yet persistent influence. Even with closure, emotional resonance endured. Photographs, letters, and mementos anchored memory, while subtle cues in the environment, the flicker of neon lights, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the hum of distant trains, evoked reflection, caution, and remembrance. Justice had been delivered, yet the lessons of trauma remained alive in consciousness, shaping decisions, perceptions, and communal behavior. Aurora, scarred and resilient, continued to navigate a delicate balance between relief, vigilance, and memory, carrying the quiet, unending echo of Emily Carson. Even as autumn faded into the gray chill of early winter, Aurora moved through its streets with a newfound caution, a collective consciousness shaped by absence and memory. Sidewalks, once traversed without thought, were now scanned, shadows noticed, footsteps measured. Parents guided children with a careful vigilance, their eyes flicking toward corners and alleyways that had once gone unobserved. Shopkeepers, commuters, and neighbors carried a quiet awareness, an almost imperceptible tension, the residue of decades of uncertainty finally answered, yet never forgotten. The diner where Emily Carson had worked remained almost sacred, her coffee mug still perched on her favorite stool, a tangible emblem of memory, a silent witness to what had been lost and what had been revealed. Margaret Carson often walked the streets she had known so well, tracing paths Emily had once taken, absorbing the textures of life still tinged with absence. The cold metal of the train tracks pressed against her palm as she leaned over, imagining Emily's footsteps along the rails. Her laughter carried faintly on the wind. Each crack in the pavement, each flickering lamplight, became part of a living mosaic of memory. The years of unanswered questions and relentless hope pressed against her chest, but the knowledge of truth, of justice finally achieved, offered a fragile solace. Closure, though incomplete, had arrived. It was like a thin layer of frost over a turbulent river, still dark and deep beneath, yet solid enough to stand upon. Thomas Carson immersed himself in the intricate timeline of the investigation once more. Every photograph, every statement, every minute piece of evidence was revisited. He traced the perpetrator's actions, the calculated patience, the exploitation of ordinary routines, and the deliberate observation that had allowed decades to pass unnoticed. The horror of such methodical predation was almost unbearable, yet clarity brought an unexpected form of relief. Understanding replaced the gnawing uncertainty. Knowing, even after 30 years, provided a framework to reconstruct memory and grief into comprehension, a way to move through life anchored by truth rather than ambiguity. Detective Jensen, though retired, reflected endlessly on the case. The early days, marked by dead-end leads and lost tips, had seemed insurmountable. Nights spent pacing offices, reviewing photographs, and reconnecting fragments of memory had finally culminated in resolution. Modern forensic breakthroughs, applied to preserved evidence, had illuminated patterns long hidden. Jensen understood that closure, while vital, did not erase the emotional imprint left on family, investigators, and community alike. Decades of waiting and fearing, of observing and wondering, remained etched into consciousness, shaping behaviors and perceptions in ways subtle but enduring. The courtroom had revealed the extent of the perpetrator's precision. Forensic experts detailed fibers, DNA traces, residual materials, and handwriting analysis, reconstructing Emily's final hours with surgical accuracy. Witnesses recounted minor events that had seemed inconsequential: a stranger loitering, a passing vehicle, a question asked casually, that became vital to understanding. The meticulous orchestration, once invisible, was now laid bare. The horror, the patience, and the deliberate manipulation shocked observers, while simultaneously illustrating the relentless diligence required to bring truth to light after decades. Aurora's residents revisited their own memories with startling clarity. A vehicle parked too long, a shadow glimpsed in an alley, a strange question recalled. These moments, once insignificant, now carried profound weight. Parents remembered warnings unspoken. Children recollected fleeting moments of unease. The collective consciousness of the city shifted, embedding vigilance and memory into everyday routines. Emily's absence had reshaped ordinary life, ensuring that communal behavior now carried the imprint of lessons learned from a tragedy that had touched everyone, subtly but irreversibly. Margaret and Thomas Carson became pillars of quiet resilience. Margaret's unwavering gaze in the courtroom sought any trace of remorse, while Thomas clutched photographs, letters, and mementos, anchoring grief in tangible reality. Their endurance over decades had forged a steadfast patience, a resolve not born of desire for vengeance, but of the need for understanding. Witnessing the reconstruction of events, the meticulous detailing of evidence, and the methodical unraveling of a decades-old crime offered bittersweet relief. Validation mingled with pain, and comprehension softened, though did not erase, the ache of absence. Even after the trial, additional details continued to surface. Phone logs, employment records, financial transactions, and sporadic communications illuminated the perpetrator's patient observation and manipulation. Each revelation exposed the meticulous choreography of a crime hidden within ordinary life. The perpetrator's calculated patience, the precision with which he observed Emily, and the subtle manipulations that enabled decades of concealment were laid bare. Investigators, armed with both modern tools and decades of dedication, reconstructed events with clarity, revealing the chilling depth of foresight and patience involved. Aurora adapted quietly but thoroughly. Streets became arenas of conscious observation, neighborhoods developed informal communication networks, schools implemented education programs focused on awareness and safety. Memory transformed into action, absence into instruction, vigilance into cultural practice. Parks, alleys, and storefronts were no longer neutral spaces, but reminders of presence and absence intertwined. Emily's story, once tragic, became a guide for behavior, a call to caution, and an emblem of communal responsibility. Her absence informed the future. The psychological toll of unresolved trauma persisted in subtle ways. Children raised during the period of uncertainty displayed heightened alertness, sensitivity to behavior, and anxiety toward ambiguity. Adults described recurring intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance, and altered perception in everyday spaces. Emily's disappearance served as a case study for ambient grief and its long-term impact on communal consciousness. Aurora emerged as both scarred and resilient, illustrating the capacity to adapt, internalize lessons, and maintain functional vigilance while living with the residual shadow of a trauma decades past. For the Carson family, memory and vigilance were inseparable. Margaret lingered in quiet moments, recalling Emily's gestures, laughter, and movement. Thomas revisited photographs, letters, and evidence, recognizing that memory could sustain presence even in absence. Their grief evolved into endurance, advocacy, and careful stewardship of legacy. Each reflection, decision, and action bore Emily's imprint, ensuring that absence remained meaningful, instructive, and persistent. Detective Jensen emphasized the importance of persistence. Methodical investigation, decades of patience, and attention to detail had illuminated a crime long concealed. Modern forensic analysis applied to historical evidence enabled a reconstruction of events with clarity unimaginable in the early 1990s. The case underscored the value of memory, observation, and steadfast ethical commitment, demonstrating that even decades of silence could not prevent truth from ultimately prevailing. Aurora, subtly transformed, carried forward its lessons. Streets, schools, and neighborhoods became spaces of active awareness. Informal community networks institutionalized vigilance, embedding lessons learned from absence and trauma into everyday life. Emily's story became a living principle. Absence taught caution, memory informed vigilance, and communal responsibility became inseparable from daily action. The city learned to navigate the balance between trauma, closure, and continued awareness, embedding reflection into habit and observation into culture. Winter descended, frost coating the streets, and the train tracks lay silent beneath the pale light of the moon. Each gleam of steel seemed to echo vanished footsteps. Neon lights cast flickering, elongated shadows that stretched across sidewalks, alleys, and intersections. The hum of traffic, distant train whistles, and subtle footsteps reverberated through the empty cityscape, magnified by decades of remembered fear. Even with resolution, Aurora remained haunted by the persistence of history. Some shadows endure long after justice is served, and the city knew it well. The Carson family immersed themselves in remembrance and education. Memorials, advocacy programs, and awareness campaigns ensured Emily's story would serve not only as memory, but as instruction. Their grief transformed into vigilance, absence into caution, memory into actionable awareness. Lessons were codified into daily life, policies, and public consciousness. Emily's presence, though absent, shaped the living. Her story became a beacon, a caution, and a guide. Even in private, memory remained vivid. Margaret observed the streets from her window, recalling laughter, gestures, and the vitality of Emily's presence. Thomas revisited letters and photographs, reconciling decades of uncertainty with the clarity of truth. Memory became a bridge connecting absence and presence, grief and endurance, loss and fragile relief. The family's lives, permanently altered, integrated trauma, reflection, and clarity into a tentative equilibrium. Aurora, transformed yet scarred, carried lessons forward. Streets, neighborhoods, and schools became conscious spaces of observation. Parks, alleyways, and storefronts were infused with awareness and history. Emily's story, embedded in the city's collective consciousness, taught vigilance, responsibility, and caution. Absence became instruction, trauma became guidance, and memory became the force shaping communal life. Shadows persisted, but they were now guides, reminders, and sentinels. Even with closure, emotional resonance remained. Photographs, letters, and small objects anchored memory. Environmental cues, the flicker of neon lights, the rustle of leaves, the distant train whistle, evoked reflection and caution. Justice had been achieved, but the lessons of trauma persisted, shaping thought, perception, and action. Aurora, forever altered, navigated a delicate balance between relief, vigilance, and memory, carrying the quiet echo of Emily Carson forward into every corner, street, and heartbeat of the city. The city of Aurora carried its breath quietly, almost reverently, as winter deepened into January. Streets glistened with frost, train tracks stood silent, and streetlights cast long, trembling shadows. The wind whispered along alleys where Emily Carson had once walked, her absence folded into the very air. The city, while outwardly ordinary, had been altered irrevocably. The echoes of a life stolen decades ago resonated in every corner, every storefront, every whispered conversation. The memory of Emily was omnipresent, not in the living but in the invisible traces she had left behind, the ghostly outlines of steps never retraced, laughter never repeated, life never fulfilled. Margaret Carson walked along the familiar sidewalks with care, each step a negotiation between grief, memory, and fragile relief. Her fingers traced the edges of familiar cracks in the pavement, the spots where Emily had paused to tie her shoe or glance at a passing train. Each detail, once trivial, now carried immense weight. Margaret felt the years pressing in, the decades of unanswered questions, the sleepless nights, the endless waiting. But she also felt a tentative calm. The revelation of truth had arrived, the perpetrator had been unmasked, and justice, however delayed, had been served. Closure, imperfect and bittersweet, had finally touched the family. Thomas Carson spent hours in quiet reflection, revisiting evidence, photographs, and witness statements. He traced the careful, patient manipulations of the perpetrator, the extraordinary precision that had allowed decades of concealment. Every small detail, Van's sightings, unusual questions, fleeting observations, revealed a mind operating with deliberate foresight. The horror of that methodical cruelty was nearly unbearable, yet clarity provided solace. Understanding replaced uncertainty, offering the Carsons a framework to process grief and integrate absence into the fabric of their lives. Detective Jensen, now retired, reflected on the enormity of the case. He recalled the dead ends, the lost tips, the nights spent reviewing photographs, revisiting crime scenes, and piecing together fragments of memory. Modern forensic breakthroughs, applied to preserved evidence, had finally illuminated the sequence of events. He understood that closure did not erase trauma, it reframed it. The city, the family, and the investigators themselves bore the invisible imprint of decades-long uncertainty, a subtle but permanent alteration in how they moved through the world, how they observed, remembered, and responded. The courtroom had exposed the meticulous orchestration of the crime. Forensic experts described fibers, DNA traces, and residual evidence that reconstructed Emily's last hours with chilling precision. Witnesses recalled fleeting, seemingly insignificant moments that now carried critical weight. The perpetrator's patient observation, deliberate manipulation, and methodical execution of the crime were laid bare. Horror and fascination intertwined, demonstrating both the magnitude of human cruelty and the perseverance of investigators who refused to let decades of silence conceal the truth. Aurora's citizens collectively revisited their memories. Strange vehicles, shadows glimpsed in alleyways, unusual interactions, all assumed new significance. Parents remembered warnings left unspoken. Children recalled moments of subtle unease, and neighbors recounted incidents that had once seemed trivial. The city's memory had become a living archive, its citizens more cautious, more observant, more attuned to potential danger. Emily's absence had reshaped ordinary life, embedding vigilance and awareness into daily existence and ensuring that her story influenced behavior long after she was gone. Margaret and Thomas Carson embodied quiet resilience. Margaret's unwavering gaze in court sought any trace of remorse, while Thomas held photographs and letters close, tangible anchors to memory and truth. Their patience, honed over decades of grief and uncertainty, had forged a resolve rooted not in vengeance, but in understanding. Witnessing the painstaking reconstruction of events and the methodical assembly of evidence provided bittersweet relief, validating their suffering while reminding them of all that had been lost. Even after the trial, new details emerged. Phone logs, financial records, employment histories, and sporadic communications revealed the perpetrator's extraordinary patience and surveillance. Each revelation exposed a meticulous orchestration, a choreography hidden in ordinary life, a cold and calculated mind revealed at last. Investigators reconstructed the crime with unprecedented clarity, bringing light to decades of darkness. The meticulousness, the forethought, the precision of the perpetrator's actions were almost incomprehensible, yet they provided the final pieces of understanding that anchored the family's long journey through uncertainty. Aurora adapted, subtly but profoundly. Streets became spaces of careful observation, neighborhoods established informal networks of communication, and schools implemented programs focused on awareness and safety. Memory became action, absence became instruction, and vigilance became embedded in the city's culture. Parks, alleys, and public spaces were no longer neutral. They carried the weight of history and memory, infused with awareness born from tragedy. Emily's story had shifted from sorrow to guidance, her absence teaching caution, her memory shaping behavior, and her legacy becoming both moral and practical instruction. The psychological impact of decades-long uncertainty persisted. Children raised under the shadow of Emily's disappearance exhibited heightened alertness, sensitivity to unusual behavior, and anxiety in ambiguous situations. Adults reported recurring intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance, and altered perception in ordinary spaces. Emily's story served as a lens for understanding ambient grief and the long-term consequences of unresolved trauma. Aurora emerged as both scarred and resilient, a city shaped by tragedy, yet capable of absorbing lessons, maintaining functional vigilance, and living alongside the persistent memory of what had occurred. For the Carson family, memory and vigilance were inseparable. Margaret spent quiet evenings recalling Emily's laughter, gestures, and presence. Thomas revisited photographs, letters, and documents, realizing that memory could sustain life in absence. Their grief evolved into endurance, advocacy, and careful stewardship of Emily's legacy. Each thought, decision, and action bore her imprint, ensuring that absence remained meaningful, instructive, and enduring. Detective Jensen emphasized the importance of persistence and methodical work. Decades of patient investigation, meticulous attention to detail, and unwavering ethical commitment had finally brought clarity. Modern forensic technology, applied to preserved evidence, reconstructed a crime long hidden, demonstrating the value of memory, observation, and relentless pursuit of truth. Even decades of silence could not prevent justice from prevailing. Aurora, forever altered, carried forward its lessons. Streets, neighborhoods, and schools became spaces of mindful observation. Informal networks institutionalized vigilance, embedding the lessons of absence and trauma into culture and everyday life. Emily's story became a guiding principle. Absence taught caution, memory informed awareness, and communal responsibility became inseparable from daily living. The city learned to navigate the delicate balance between trauma, closure, and continued vigilance, integrating reflection into habit and observation into civic consciousness. Winter deepened, frost covering streets and rooftops. The train tracks, silent witnesses to the past, reflected the pale moonlight, each glimmer echoing footsteps never retraced. Neon lights flickered against wet streets, casting long, distorted shadows. Traffic hummed in the background, distant train whistles carried across the night, and footsteps, subtle yet deliberate, resonated through the empty cityscape. Even with legal resolution, Aurora remained haunted by history. Some shadows endure long after justice is achieved, and the city knew it well. The Carson family immersed themselves in memorials, advocacy, and public education. Margaret and Thomas ensured that Emily's story would not be forgotten, that her absence would inform and protect, that memory would guide. Grief transformed into vigilance, absence became instruction, and legacy turned into action. Lessons were codified into city practice, policy, and consciousness, ensuring that Emily's life and story continued to influence generations beyond her own. The family's advocacy became a living memorial, shaping awareness and resilience for all who would live in the city she once walked. Even in private, memory remained potent. Margaret watched familiar streets from her window, recalling laughter, gestures, and energy. Thomas revisited photographs and documents, reconciling decades of uncertainty with clarity and truth. Memory became a bridge between absence and presence, grief and endurance, loss and tentative relief. Their lives, permanently changed, integrated trauma, reflection, and understanding into a new, delicate equilibrium. Aurora, transformed yet scarred, carried lessons forward. Streets, neighborhoods, and schools became conscious spaces of observation. Parks, alleyways, and public venues absorbed awareness, vigilance, and history. Emily's story, etched into the city's collective consciousness, became instruction, guidance, and a moral compass. Absence shaped action, trauma guided behavior, and memory directed the living. Shadows remained, but they now served as sentinels, reminders, and lessons. Even after closure, emotional resonance endured. Photographs, letters, and mementos anchored memory. Environmental cues, the flicker of neon lights, the crunch of snow underfoot, the distant train whistle, evoked reflection, caution, and vigilance. Justice had been achieved, yet the lessons of trauma persisted, shaping thought, perception, and action. Aurora, scarred but resilient, navigated a delicate balance between relief, vigilance, and memory, carrying the quiet, unending echo of Emily Carson into every street, alleyway, and heartbeat of the city. The first light of dawn stretched across Aurora, pale and hesitant, brushing frost from streets and rooftops. The city stirred quietly, as if cautious not to disturb the lingering memory of what had passed. Emily Carson's absence, though resolved in the court of law, remained etched into every brick, every corner, every alleyway. The city had learned to walk with shadows, to honor presence in absence, to carry vigilance as a quiet, unspoken companion. Parents led children with careful observation, neighbors exchanged glances heavy with remembered caution, and the diner where Emily had once sat now carried the solemn weight of remembrance. Her coffee cup remained in place, a silent monument to a life stolen, yet remembered, enduring. Margaret Carson walked along the familiar streets, tracing the path Emily had once known. Fingers brushed frost-covered edges of sidewalks, touching familiar cracks and uneven pavements. Each step resonated with memory. Emily's laughter, the rhythm of her walk, the tilt of her head, gestures small yet profound. Margaret felt decades of absence pressing in, the weight of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and relentless worry. And yet, in the clarity of truth, there was a fragile solace. The perpetrator had been unmasked, justice delivered, and yet life had been forever altered. Closure was imperfect, like sunlight filtered through frosted glass, illuminating some truths while leaving the shadows deep and intact. Thomas Carson revisited every fragment of the investigation, every photograph, every witness statement, every forensic report. The perpetrator's meticulous patience, the subtle exploitation of routine, and the deliberate orchestration of decades-long concealment unfolded like a carefully constructed narrative of horror. Horror intertwined with understanding. Each act, each manipulation, each calculated move revealed a mind of extraordinary precision. The clarity offered relief, a framework to navigate grief and memory, transforming absence from chaos into comprehension. The truth did not erase what had been lost, but it allowed a tentative reconciliation with the past, a bridge over the chasm of uncertainty. Detective Jensen, reflecting on the case from retirement, recognized the profound endurance required to bring resolution. The early days had been marked by dead ends, missing leads, and frustratingly incomplete information. Yet persistence, combined with modern forensic technology, had illuminated a path through decades of darkness. He understood that closure did not erase trauma, it reframed it. The city, the family, and those who had carried the case bore an invisible imprint of long-held uncertainty, a mark on their perception, behavior, and memory. Aurora had been transformed, its collective awareness forever heightened, its streets imbued with a quiet, vigilant consciousness. The courtroom revealed the full scope of the perpetrator's methodical orchestration. Forensic experts reconstructed Emily's final hours with meticulous precision, describing fibers, DNA traces, and residual materials. Witnesses recalled seemingly minor events, moments once deemed trivial, that now became essential in revealing the crime's full narrative. The perpetrator's patient observation, strategic manipulation, and careful concealment were laid bare, shocking the courtroom while illustrating the unwavering dedication of those who refused to let decades of silence obscure truth. The horror was vivid, almost tangible, yet it provided closure, however fragile, for a family long denied understanding. Aurora's citizens collectively revisited their memories. Odd vehicles, shadows glimpsed along alleyways, and fleeting interactions assumed profound significance. Parents remembered the quiet warnings they had once dismissed, neighbors recalled unusual behaviors they had overlooked. The city's memory had become a living archive. Emily's absence reshaped daily routines, embedding vigilance and awareness into the communal consciousness. Her story, her life, and her absence became a guidepost, ensuring lessons were integrated into the city's very fabric, a constant, silent reminder of both fragility and resilience. Margaret and Thomas Carson embodied quiet strength and perseverance. Margaret's gaze, unwavering in court, sought signs of remorse, while Thomas held on to photographs, letters, and tangible mementos of memory. Their endurance over decades of waiting had forged a resolve rooted not in vengeance, but in understanding. The reconstruction of events and meticulous assembly of evidence offered bittersweet relief, a validation of grief and acknowledgement of loss. The slow unveiling of truth allowed reflection and comprehension, a necessary balance between sorrow and understanding. Even after the trial, revelations continued to surface. Phone records, financial data, employment histories, and sporadic communications revealed the perpetrator's extraordinary foresight and surveillance. Each detail exposed the chilling orchestration of crime, hidden within the ordinary patterns of daily life. Investigators, with modern tools and decades of dedication, reconstructed the perpetrator's actions, revealing the meticulous choreography that had kept Emily's disappearance a secret for so long. The revelation, horrifying yet illuminating, provided the final threads of understanding for a family and community who had waited decades for clarity. Aurora quietly transformed. Streets became arenas of observation, neighborhoods developed informal communication networks, and schools implemented programs to foster awareness and safety. Memory became action, absence became guidance, and vigilance became embedded in the culture. Parks, alleyways, and public spaces carried the weight of history, awareness, and caution. Emily's story shifted from tragedy to instruction, absence to guidance, her life influencing behavior, her memory shaping community consciousness. Lessons learned were codified into civic practice, ensuring that knowledge born of loss informed generations yet to come. The psychological toll of unresolved trauma remained subtle but profound. Children raised during Emily's disappearance displayed heightened alertness, sensitivity, and anxiety. Adults reported recurring intrusive thoughts and hypervigilance in ordinary spaces. The case became a study in ambient grief, a living demonstration of how long-term uncertainty could permeate a community. Aurora emerged as a city marked by tragedy yet resilient, capable of integrating lessons from trauma while maintaining vigilance and awareness. The community had learned to navigate loss, fear, and memory without succumbing to paralysis, reshaping its culture with cautious intention. For the Carson family, memory and vigilance remained intertwined. Margaret observed the streets from her window, recalling Emily's gestures, laughter, and vitality. Thomas revisited photographs and notes, understanding that memory could sustain presence in absence. Their grief evolved into endurance, advocacy, and careful stewardship of legacy. Each thought, decision, and action bore Emily's imprint. Absence remained meaningful, instructive, and enduring. Their lives, permanently altered, had integrated trauma, reflection, and clarity into a fragile but stable equilibrium. Detective Jensen emphasized the value of persistence and methodical diligence. Decades of patient investigation, unwavering ethical commitment, and careful attention to detail had illuminated a crime long hidden. Modern forensic tools applied to preserved evidence reconstructed events with clarity unimaginable in the early 1990s. The case demonstrated the intersection of memory, observation, and human endurance, proving that even decades of silence could not suppress truth indefinitely. Aurora, permanently changed, carried lessons forward. Streets, schools, and neighborhoods became conscious spaces of observation. Informal networks institutionalized vigilance, embedding lessons of absence, trauma, and memory into culture. Emily's story became a guiding principle. Absence taught caution, memory shaped behavior, and community responsibility became inseparable from daily life. Shadows persisted, but they became sentinels, markers of vigilance, and reminders of human fragility and resilience. Winter deepened, frost clinging to every surface. The train tracks, silent witnesses to past events, reflected moonlight in pale, ghostly streaks. Neon lights flickered over wet streets, casting long, distorted shadows. Traffic hummed, trains whispered across the distance, and footsteps echoed softly through the night. Even with resolution, the city remained haunted by its own memory. Some shadows endure beyond justice, shaping perception, guiding caution, and reminding the living that history is never truly gone. The Carson family engaged in memorials, advocacy, and public education. They ensured that Emily's story would endure, instruct, and protect. Grief transformed into vigilance, absence became instruction, and legacy became action. Lessons were codified into civic practice, policy, and cultural consciousness, allowing Emily's life to continue influencing the living. The family's advocacy became a living memorial, shaping awareness, resilience, and understanding for all who walked the streets she once knew. Even in private, memory remained vivid. Margaret observed familiar streets, recalling gestures, laughter, and presence. Thomas revisited photographs and letters, reconciling decades of uncertainty with truth. Memory became a bridge between absence and presence, grief and endurance, loss and tentative relief. Their lives, permanently altered, integrated trauma, reflection, and understanding into a delicate equilibrium. Aurora, forever changed, carried lessons forward. Streets, neighborhoods, schools, and parks became spaces of reflection, vigilance, and awareness. Emily's story, embedded in the city's consciousness, became instruction, guidance, and a moral compass. Absence shaped action, trauma informed behavior, and memory directed the living. Shadows remained, yet they guided, reminded, and taught. Even with closure, the emotional resonance endured. Photographs, letters, and mementos anchored memory. Environmental cues, the flicker of neon lights, the crunch of frost underfoot, distant train whistles, evoked reflection, caution, and awareness. Justice had been achieved, but the lessons of trauma persisted. Aurora, scarred and resilient, continued to navigate the delicate balance between relief, vigilance, and memory, carrying the quiet, unending echo of Emily Carson into every corner, every street, and every heartbeat of the city. And as the sun rose fully, washing frost and shadow with pale light, one truth remained. Emily Carson's life, her absence, and the relentless pursuit of truth had transformed a family, a city, and a generation. Her story endured, not as a tragedy confined to history, but as a living, breathing force of caution, memory, and vigilance, haunting in its sorrow, inspiring in its resolution, permanent in its resonance. Aurora would never forget.